Is this thing on, Omni?
What is Greg lurking?
Yeah. Omni, I asked you a question. Please respond. I'm just kidding, bro. I'm just messing with you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it when you're here early, and you're one of the first people in chat. So even if you can't hear me or respond, thank you, Omni. Good morning, chat. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, just me and Tony.
Correct.
But yeah, we are vibing today. Let's see. We've got a bunch of interesting topics of conversation, I think, in the gaming sphere, gamosphere. What do we call it?
UE 5.5 came out.
Yep, 5.5. Let's go.
That's big.
You want to tell me what's in there? Because I don't know shit about it.
I was looking through the change list. There is kind of just like a lot of there's like the megalights are in alpha or preview or something like that. That was one of the big ones. There is they made a lot of improvements to the mobile specifically side of things and the mobile forward renderer, which is actually probably kind of relevant to us because I think that's probably what gets used when you're doing standalone Quest. So supposedly they have brought it up to feature parity with the desktop forward renderer. And I was reading that they added the ability for it to use things like Niagara particle systems. So I was kind of unaware that if you were doing a mobile game with Unreal up until this point, you actually couldn't even use Niagara. So has a bunch of apparently new stuff that would allow you to effectively create a non-Lumen and Nanite ray trace Unreal project and kind of spin it out for like PC and console and mobile, and it should in effect be exactly the same on all three now, which is cool.
Oh hell yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, and so that's going to be huge for standalone VR, I think. But I haven't heard too many people talking about it just yet.
That's
I also
very
did
cool.
not see mention of the world partition static lighting thing that had been mentioned during development in the notes. So I need to go digging and see if that was in there and just like didn't make the feature blog thing that they wrote. But
because we're the only one that cares about it.
For real, yeah. I mean, the last mention I can find of it on the forums or anything online is like 2 or 3 years old at this point. So there's not too many people asking for it, but we could probably do some really cool shit with it if it is in there. So we'll see what happens. But other than that, there's just a bunch of like sequencer and animation and stuff that
sequencer stuff. I should go look into that.
Yeah, the sequencer stuff, it looks like they added a bunch of like ways that you can like trigger sequences from sequences and add like logic and stuff to them. So I guess it looks like stuff that people were pretty excited about.
Yeah, that's one of the most painful points of working with sequencer, is trying to get all that stuff to like triggering a sequence from a sequence is just horrible UX. It's very difficult to use as a tool, but it's so powerful.
Going through that whole trailer thing taught me a lot too about like There's a way to do sequencer where you kind of get everything set up, and then like if you have to mess with it at all, it's just broken, and you have to basically start over.
You have to rebuild the references and shit. I ran into that so many times.
Well, it's not even that. It's like if you move the thing to a different place, or you need to make some like big change to it. It's like all of the keyframing, you know, is like based off of your original thing. So I figured out a good way, and Unreal had this already, where you can do everything additively on top of the base of the sequencer, basically, and that allows you to kind of like add it onto whatever you need to and move things around. And so like again, they're kind of adding a lot more flexibility into the sequencer over time to kind of get away from that clunkiness that has been
really good. Yeah, it's a super powerful tool. What's up, Wampus? Got Wamp in chat. Womping around like some kind of wampy.
I got Wampus addicted to Balatro.
That's good.
He is like gone even harder than I have, though. So I'm glad he's liking it. Because
tell me about it. What are your thoughts, bro? I want to hear. Because I have unpopular opinions about Balatro. I'm like the only person who doesn't like it, but I also like it. Like that, it's a good game. It's just not for me. So like as weird as that is,
it's funny. His RNG is like abysmal though, because there's just like certain cards, you know, that'll like set your run off in Balatro, and he'll be like, I haven't seen, you know, like a DNA in 5 days, and the first game I play, I'm like second round, I'm like, oh, there's a DNA, and then it just happened like 3 days in a row. I was sending him screenshots. Felt bad.
Got luck of the Tony.
It's been my my cardio secret recently, is I just don't let myself stop doing cardio until the Balatro run is over. So.
Oh, that's nice, dude. That's a great idea.
Yep.
I hate cardio. That's why I climb.
Oh, it sucks.
It works for me.
Why I need something like Balatro to, you know, kind of distract me and give me something to kind of have an endpoint to work towards.
So Wampus, you said you get effed by the RNG. Yeah, that's literally what my biggest gripe with Balatro is the RNG. I understand. So, you know, I don't want to go into this, but we got into a very heated conversation about whether or not Balatro is a deck builder. So I'm not going to go into that. But the point that I was making is that in deck builder style games, or in a deck builder, RNG is a really important component of it, because it's simulating the that feeling and that experience that you get as a TCG player. So when you know, back in the day before these games existed in digital format, you would go to your game store and you would buy booster packs. So say you're a Magic the Gathering player, the whole point of deck builder style games is you get, you know, a box of cards, pull all the cards out. You're going to get a bunch of commons. You're going to get some uncommons. You'll get some rares, right? You construct a deck out of that and then play it. That's a whole tournament format for TCGs. So that, in my opinion, I don't know if this is true or not, Dominion being the first TCG or deck building game, I think that's why they did that, because those were really popular at the time, or like gaining more popularity. Let me see if I'm talking completely out of my ass here. I can't remember what year it came out. I'm looking right now, 2008. So Dominion was the first like popular deck building game. Oh, thanks, man. Yo, love Vice Grip. Derek Beery. Watch a feller work on some cars in a field. But yeah, the Dominion card game was like the first deck builder. And what's interesting about it is like it's a board game. So when you bought it, you got all of the cards. So like in the box is every card that exists in the game, and you draft like, you know, 5 or 10 cards, some small amount, and then you're playing against other players who are also drafting but competing with different strategies in how they want to build their deck. And that's just the whole game. So that being said, you know, we fast forward 12 years, whatever the fuck it is, math, some number of years, and we get to games like Balatro becoming very popular, but the genre has been around for a long time. And I think of Balatro as like a very entry-level deck builder. It's very easy for people to understand, especially if they're not familiar with TCGs and the whole draft process, because it just uses a deck of poker playing cards, which I think is very smart. my gripes about it were the way the UI and the just the visual treatment, the aesthetics of the game are very, very close to video poker. And I think video poker is dangerous for people because you're not the whole aspect of poker is you're playing the people. When you're playing just against a machine, you're going to lose all the time. So I'm not a big fan of gambling. That's not to say that people shouldn't be allowed to gamble. I don't give a shit about that. Gamble all you want. If you like it and it's fun, cool, go for it. Go gamble. The thing that I'm concerned with is, like, I've talked about this before with games as a service and, you know, a bunch of game design stuff. The human behaviors that we have get used against us, especially in, you know, by casinos and gambling. Like, that's the whole point. The house always wins. That's a statement for a reason. It's on purpose. It's designed to be that way. So if you like going and just throwing your money away and having a good time and getting free drinks and, like, you know, screwing around, cool. That's totally fine. And I think that's the good way to enjoy gambling. If you get into it thinking like you're going to get rich off of it, that's the trap. Don't even get there. Wampa says, I heard somewhere, maybe from Tony, that they apparently are against gambling and they would never sell the idea to a casino. That's interesting. Yes, that's really good.
I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
I don't know. I'm trusting your word on this one.
But imagine hitting like a DNA blueprint in the casino.
Oh yeah,
let's go. You'd be set. I don't think any casino in their right mind would pick it up for reasons like that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Balatro is intended to make you win most of the time. So it's, yeah, and the dopamine that you're talking about is what I mean by the human behaviors. The way our brains work is to help us survive as animals out in the world. It has nothing to do with playing video games. And video games are really good at using those psychological mechanisms against us to make us feel certain things. What I like about that as a game designer is that I try to tell people stories that make them think about life in a different way. There's another way where you can prey on people's behaviors and make them feel compelled to spend more money. And that's what games as a service do most of the time. That's what the like free to play model originally came out for, was like, it gets gross. When you have a premium game with MTX in it, that's when you start seeing a lot of the gambling stuff being used, against the player to separate them from their money. Let's see.
We never talked about the Ubisoft NFT game thing. I think that was like in our notes maybe last week or the week before, but I don't know if you saw how that has been going. But
no, I don't know anything about that.
So I put out this, I think it's like a hero shooter extraction thing, maybe something like that. I don't know. It kind of almost sounded like the Dr. Disrespect type thing, which was also an NFT game. But anyways,
the Midnight Society game.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, you could buy special characters, I think, that were NFTs that cost money, and very quickly the price of some of them were up in the like $60,000 range or something like that.
That's
but
crazy.
Then when people started trying to play the game, like a games journalist went and tried to play it to review it and was finding that there was a hacker who had somehow manipulated the servers to make it so that anytime you tried to join a match, it would only be against him. And then he had like all these like wall hacks and stuff, so he would just like kill you instantly every single time. And this guy's like, I legitimately wanted to play this game, give it a review, and I tried for like multiple days, and this was the only thing that would happen to me when I tried to play it. And
this is the Ubisoft one or the Midnight Society game?
No, this is the Ubisoft
man.
one. And then I haven't looked into it since, but that was the last thing that I had read about it. It sounded like it was very much not going well.
Oh, that sucks.
I'll look it up here while we're talking, see if I can find anything about it.
I mean, since we're talking about that, I guess that could probably segue pretty well into conversations about what do we have here? Let's see. We've got a couple things about, like, there was a story about NetEase employees being indicted for money laundering. There was a story about Nintendo suing a player who was repeatedly pirating Switch games and like streaming this. So I think the article title here is a little disingenuous, saying that it's suing a player. Like, this guy was making money off of pirating things and breaking NDA repeatedly. He was hit with a bunch of cease and desist, and he basically like taunted Nintendo and was like, you can't stop me, I'm gonna do whatever I want. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is there's a weird line between enjoying games and using an emulator to experience something that you can't buy a console for anymore, that you wanted to play like really far back in the day, like a 20-year-old game. That I feel like, okay, so I'll clarify. It's still piracy. You're still stealing something because you're getting it for free. And that's bad. The reason that's bad is because it potentially squeezes people like us who are trying to make games. So if like people steal our game, that's not a good thing. Like, getting visibility on it is totally great, but hopefully we can have marketing work out for us in a way that people want to buy our game instead of stealing it. So it's tough. It's very hard because like I can understand as a gamer wanting to experience things and really enjoy, especially classic games. But as someone who makes games, it's incredibly harmful to us and harmful to the business and to the, just the industry in general. So I see why Nintendo needs to go really hard and like try to squash this guy. And what was the other fucking thing? Ryujinx, is that the emulator that was really popular? So they were in litigation with those guys for a while, and they settled out of court by acquiring them. So they just bought the company, and the first thing they did was like shut it down. So I mean, that's a way. I think that's an interesting strategy, but you have to have a ton of money before you can even make that a possibility to stop the bleeding, of illicit, theft, I guess, just stealing the product. So that being said, this article that I read about this guy is pretty crazy because like this dude's official response to like cease and desist was like, I have so many burner accounts that, burner streaming accounts that it doesn't matter if I get banned from these platforms. I'm going to keep making my videos and they will always reference me and I will always make money off of them. Like, that guy's a shithead. I'm just saying, like, that guy's a shithead. I don't know what he's doing for other than like personal gain. He's not like, he doesn't have a cause. He's not trying to prove a point. His point is, I'm going to make money off of your shit. And I didn't make any of it. And I'm, just being a swindler and trying to operate in loopholes. That stuff sucks.
There's a lot of people on there's a podcast called Darknet Diaries that's about people who hack and kind of do illicit black hat things like this. And a lot of them, the stories are from, kids who are, 17 or whatnot and start kind of learning how to do this stuff and just do like kind of terrible, destructive things because it's fun when you're a teenager and you don't really know any better. And I've listened to probably every episode of this podcast over the years, and I can think of so many instances where it's people who are just kind of like, yeah, that was my attitude at the time. I just didn't care, and I just wanted to like, make life as hard for Nintendo or whoever it was as possible. And they're like, I really regret it, and I don't even really understand why I did it now. But like it's easy to like hear the things that Vince is saying and just be like, well, like he doesn't know what this guy's thinking or if he has a reason. And it's like, that might be true, but at the same time, like I really heard a lot of like, especially like teenage age people, and I remember being that age, just kind of like
same
legitimately doing this stuff for fun and just actually kind of having like a vindictive attitude about it to some extent. And it kind of sounds like this is very much a case of that, and the guy's being very public and blatant about it, and I don't think that's going to go very well for him in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it a little bit, but back in the day we had a way to use Net Zero for free, and so Net Zero is weird. This was like a really old product. It worked off of a 56k or 28.8 modem, but it would give you, it was like AOL, so you would connect to their service using your phone line. And, we had figured out a way because my buddy and I like wanted to play, Warcraft 2 over the internet or like Mech Warrior, you know, shit like that, like some older games. We wanted to do those things, but being like 14 years old, you know, we didn't have the means to go get internet on our own. So we figured out these ways. All this shit was illegal for sure. Like, there's no way we were doing anything that was above board, but we weren't doing anything bad with it. We just wanted to play video games. Like, so I don't know. It's strange because, like, I think about that and I'm like, they're just kids, you know, they're doing kid stuff. But when you take it this far and you start getting into like, this guy's making money off of this, and his whole thing is to be like in your face, big corporation. Like, he's not fighting anyone that's doing anything bad. Like, I don't get that part of it. But we can then segue into how, you know, Nintendo was suing the Power World guys, and that's viewed as like a case of bullying. So the opposite end of that is,
and that's viewed as a case of bullying specifically by like a legal analyst.
Yeah.
You know, whether you put more stock in that statement because of that or not, that's just who said it. So
yeah. So that's where Nintendo is using their money to squash competition, which is different from stopping someone who's doing something illegal that's damaging your brand and literally just taking money out of your pocket, right? Like, that's a very different thing. These guys made a competing game based off of some ideas that Nintendo came up with. That's tricky. I feel like that's shitty. We should always have competition. It's healthy for everyone, and squashing the competition because you have the resources to do so, it's a smart business decision. Like, honestly, I can see why they would do that. But I don't think it's good for, like, I personally would respond. So if I were John Nintendo in this case, and I would be like, I don't like how these Power World guys are like eating a piece of my pie, I'd be like, how do we beat them? You know, how do we make our shit better so that their game looks stupid? Because we're the big badasses. Let's make our shit better. That's the way I think that's the correct response, instead of just being like, I'm gonna sue these guys into oblivion so they can't operate anymore. Like, that's
because to some extent it does come across. It's like, we're gonna make shitty Pokemon games and we're not going to let anybody make a better version of it. It's like, yep, totally.
Yeah, I think the better response from Nintendo, instead of like suing them because they tried to patent the Pokeball mechanic, which is a really weird thing to do anyway, because it's not
after Power World came out too.
Yeah. They've been trying to patent the Pokeball for a while. They just keep like pushing it. They've tried to do all kinds of weird patents, but patents don't necessarily mean a whole lot, which is a strange thing to think about, but they really don't.
We're also talking about a Japanese patent potentially being enforced in the United States and vice versa. So
I think, if anything, the only reason they do that, if the Japanese government is like, cool, this works, is because it'll stop Power World from being sold in Japan, right? So they're just trying to edge their competition out of the market. And I understand why you would do that as a business owner, but I also think that, you know, like I was saying, I think the best way to combat that is make your shit better. Just make it better than them. They can do it. It's fucking Nintendo. Striva says, Nintendo making tournament life hell for Super Smash Bros. Melee's made me root for their loss for years. They're not doing anything to make me think otherwise. I understand that opinion as well. I also thought that was really fucking weird. Smash has a very supportive community. It's a really robust player base, and Nintendo has been very, very fervent in saying, no, you can't play our games, especially the old ones, in competition.
Yeah, they're just like straight up like, stop playing Melee, and everybody's like, yeah, we like Melee the best, and like, no, you can't play Melee anymore. You have to play Ultimate. It's like, no, but we want to play Melee, and they're like, no.
And the weird thing about this, and if you don't know, chat, like, I really like all aspects of gaming, pretty much, and I love fighting game tournaments, and I watch like Evo every year, and watching Smash, you know, right before Smash Ultimate came out, they did a huge event at Evo because they got permission from Nintendo to do one, and that was it. And the reason why they can't do it anymore is because Nintendo said, if you do this again, we will sue the shit out of you. So Nintendo was like, we will shut Evo down because people want to play a game that we haven't made for over 10 years. What the fuck? Like, that's crazy.
So, I think you could probably add, because people want to play a game we haven't made for 10 years and we don't get any money from that.
Yeah, that's fair. So I think that kind of ties into the corporate greed thing that we're all experiencing and we're all suffering from lately. But
that being said, like, do you think Tekken or Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter get money for their game being at Evo? I wouldn't think so. I would think it's just like really good advertising.
No. Yes, it is. And the difference here,
which I guess like Nintendo's not going to make any money on Melee even if they advertise it, but still, like, I don't know. It just
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Street Fighter because Street Fighter is made by a Japanese company as well, Capcom. Capcom leans into it really hard. They have official presence at Evo. So Evo is listed as a major in the Pro Tour. Yeah. So like they are like, we recognize this is great for our community and it sells new copies of our game. So this is how we want to do it. And they've leaned in entirely. Tekken did the same thing. They have like one of the commentators for the Tekken tournaments works for Bandai Namco. He's like their community manager. Like, that's super smart. That's so good. And the Tekken shit is so fucking hype because of that. Like, they're very invested in it. They make the tournaments better. So I just don't understand Nintendo's reasoning here. I think maybe if I had to guess, there was probably an executive meeting and they talked about the pros and cons of leaning into it and saying like, here's what would happen if we supported it. And they probably were like, this is too much money for us. We don't want to spend the time and effort. So let's just spend time and effort, making them not do it. So I don't know.
This could also be like, Nintendo and Miyamoto specifically, and Sakurai, I think to some extent too, are like, those Kojima style auteurs that I think have very specific opinions about the stuff that they make and the things that they've made and the way that their company is perceived. And I could just see all of them just kind of being like, no, Melee is a thing of the past and we don't do Melee anymore. And we're looking forward and innovating and we're not going to keep supporting that game. Like, it could just be even that too. Just like some weird, not even monetary reasoning.
I think it's probably a combination of that, and the monetary reasoning is, well, we have Smash Ultimate. We want you guys to buy this game and play this game instead. And
buy our DLCs. Better. And yeah, totally. Pay for Switch Online, all of that. Yep.
Yeah, and the problem is, Sakurai had a very specific vision for what he wanted the Smash games to be, and they're different from Melee. And that's why, people are like, well, I want to play Melee because Melee has a distinct feel to it. So I think the right way to do it would be like Smash Ultimate has a settings thing that gives you Melee gameplay. And you can be like, I'm playing a Melee tournament in Smash Ultimate. That would be fucking cool as hell. And then they could lean into it.
We're talking about like them effectively creating like an entire second like controller for
of course,
the character. Yes. But I guess like, I don't know. They could do it at this point. They've put like 500 characters in the game. Like, what's one more?
Yeah, I think there's a good way to do it. And to be fair, Nintendo is a little bit adversarial to fans. They really are. I love Nintendo, not because I'm like a brand loyalist and I'm like, Nintendo could do so no wrong in my eyes. That's not what I mean. It doesn't work like that for me. I'm not a brand loyalist to anyone. What I mean is I love the things that they created, like Super Mario Brothers, The Legend of Zelda, Metroid. Like, these are all, like, Star Fox. These are all very important IPs to me. They help me like think about the world in a different way, right? Like, it helped my imagination grow, and just it's a part of the reason why I do what I do for a living now. So like, that's why I have a fondness for Nintendo. It's not because of business practices or like the products they're releasing now. I think they're a little out of touch, especially now. They're not keeping up with the gamers, and this is it's interesting because I've talked about how Western devs like really lean into business and they're not playing their own games and they're not doing that. Japanese developers do it in a completely different way. They don't index off of business metrics nearly as much as Western developers do. They appear to index more on like the vision for the game that they're making. And I think FromSoft is a really good example. From makes From games. They don't make games that are trying to seek like, mass market appeal and all of that stuff, and they're still very successful because they have a style. They make games that certain players love to play, and that is smart in my opinion. And I think that's the healthy way for the industry to go, is make shit that's good, and it's not appealing to the broadest audience, but having a very strong vision and really caring about like what that player experience is and knowing who your audience is and targeting them in the appropriate way. When I say that, I don't mean the audience is all of humanity. That's stupid. That will never work. That's how you get, very flat milquetoast, boring shit, because it appeals to everyone. So nobody likes it. Tony, you said Fortune 50 in Japan. Oh yeah, totally.
They're one of the wealthiest companies in Japan, and they have to publish their financial statements for their shareholders and stuff, and they have billions and billions of dollars like in the bank, in their bank account. They're not hurting. They like with the Wii U, they can afford to effectively bomb an entire console generation and still come out the other side okay.
And for what it's worth, the Switch was a great play, honestly.
It's sold better than any other console by a lot. Yeah,
really smart play. The Wii and the Wii U were not my favorite consoles. I definitely have owned, and I still own both. Like we probably have 2 Wiis, and I definitely have a Wii U. I thought the Wii U did some cool stuff, but it was a very strange experience. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I appreciate that Nintendo is willing to take risks like that with hardware that, I guess this is what I mean. And like, they believe in the vision so much that they're like, we're going to make something we don't know that anyone wants, but we hope they want it. And I love that. I think that's great. So I guess it's a double-edged sword, right? Like to use the cliche, it's, you have to fight and squash Pal World, right? Because you're making big, crazy risks on hardware that might lose you $100 million, over a year, right? So I don't know. It's tricky. I don't ever want to get into the hardware business. Fuck that, dude. Pretty much every single hardware platform manufacturer loses money on their consoles. They barely make any money, if they do at all. It's all software. So
I think that's going to change as we get to this point where like software is being generated in real time for bespoke purposes and stuff like that. And then you're going to go back to like, you can't have AI create hardware out of thin air. So people will start creating really interesting hardware to interface with those processes. But for now, it's absolutely the case. Software's king. Hardware doesn't really matter.
Nice. I like that. Well, since we're talking about that, Tony, did you look at the analog 4K Nintendo 64?
I've seen it. Yep.
Thoughts on that?
I don't have most of my retro stuff anymore, sadly. I have a little bit, but I also find all of that, like using cartridges and getting all that stuff out and stuff is kind of clunky and inconvenient, and I tend to lean towards an emulator even for stuff that I own, and I've gone through the process of like dumping my own games and stuff in the past. But all that to say, that product probably isn't for me, mostly just because I don't have any N64 games laying around aside from probably like 2 or 3, and I don't know, I don't feel the need to like get them out and play them specifically, and if I really wanted to, I would emulate them. And if I wanted to go buy some, I think we all know that one cartridge is probably several $100s depending on which one you're going for and stuff. And I don't get the point. I really don't. There are people out there who have giant, massive collections and are super hardcore about playing on a CRT and getting the classic experience with all of that, and happy for them. And I'm sure they're very stoked about that thing coming out. So, yeah.
I will say this, the only thing that appeals to me, and I do have a pretty big collection of N64 carts, the only thing that really appeals to me about this is the controller, because those N64 controllers died in like a month. Like the stick drift was so fucking bad. Every single one is this like floppy, like, this loose like thumbstick that just doesn't work anymore. So being able to play those games on a new controller would be cool. I need to also add in, I've never played my old console. Like I have a huge collection of games that I've been collecting since I was like 8 years old. I don't play my old games. There are thousands of games I've played, and there are too many good games so that there's always something new for me to play. And I just don't see a reason. I guess if you're really into, like, okay, analog 4K is probably great for the Smash community. I'll say that. Like if you're playing OG Smash or yeah, Melee is the one that was on. No, that was GameCube, right?
Yeah, but GameCube doesn't go up to HD either.
Yep. So. Yeah, exactly. So like having the ability to play OG Smash would be pretty cool, especially with new controllers and like not having to get, you know, the Wavebird adapter and all that other shit. Like that sounds cool.
I was gonna say these days, like I know for a fact that they make stuff that's like an N64 controller, or even like a thing. I'm almost positive this exists. Or there's a Bluetooth adapter for your Xbox controller that you plug into the controller port on the N64, and it like pins it as an N64 controller for you and stuff. So
okay,
you don't necessarily need to buy the 4K thing, but then you could play it on your HD TV too. But I know you know, aside from most people, actually have a nice CRT that you can play on too.
Yeah.
Though. So yeah,
I do. I have like one of those 40-inch Sony's.
Like the best
40,
CRT
42 or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it weighs like 400 pounds. It's super crazy heavy. But I've had that thing for years. You know, shout out to Illuminous. He hooked me up with that thing when he got a flat panel. And I had a very, very shitty TV that I was playing games on. Yeah, Ramblin', same. I have a huge bin of old games that are just in storage. It would be cool eventually to have like a display case for them or something, but I don't know. I'm not really into displaying things. I mean, we talked about this guy when I set it up, and like the Reach statue, and I have like the Marcus Phoenix statue from the Gears Collector's Edition. I have a bunch of that shit, and I like these things, and they're cool to look at. But at the same time, like I've got to dust them. You know, I have to make sure that they look nice. When they're in a box, it's like sort of out of sight, out of mind, and I don't know. I have too many like toys and like gizmos to look at, so it's weird. And as I say all this, like I look around my office and I have so many special and collector's edition things from the game industry. Like my Quest 2 is right here on my desk, and it's sitting in, I'll show you guys real quick. It's sitting in a Don't Starve collectible like plushie thing that they only sold at Penny Arcade. And it is a Shadow Chester. So the Chester was a character you could get, and he was a treasure chest for extra inventory slots that followed you around, and he would bounce around, and you would have to carry this thing in your inventory, the eye bone. And when you did, you could open him up, whoop, and put stuff into the chest. So I have this sitting on my desk. They only made like a couple hundred of these, and they only sold them at PAX, but I love it. It's a very high quality thing. It's cool. I enjoy it, and it's a nice little soft case for my Quest 2 that sits on my desk. So I don't know. It's weird. I go back and forth. I don't really buy collector's edition stuff as much anymore, or like, you know, rare gaming things. I just have so many. So who knows? I'll probably buy more shit. I still regret not having the Death Stranding baby in a jar thing. That thing was really cool. It'd be cool to put that in my living room and terrorize my wife with it. Hey, what's up, Anna? We're talking about Nintendo and games industry litigation and piracy and emulators and all that stuff. That's what we're chatting about right now. So let's get into another one of the bad things. I saw that for... the fuck was this game? Some kind of Marvel thing? Marvel Rivals, that was it. So it looks like... yeah, it looks like there's a group of executives at NetEase that were laundering money through Marvel Rivals, like $130 million. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I was seeing people comment on this, and they're just taking it the wrong fucking way entirely. A lot of the comments I saw were like, I can't believe these guys greed. They could have gotten away with $30 million and just been set for life. And it's like, guys, That's not what fucking money laundering is. Money laundering is when you have dirty money that comes from illegal activities that you need to hide in your taxes. So they put it through a fucking video game in some way through like the real world economy in the video game. And that money comes out as gains for them. So
you buy your own premium currency.
You buy your own shit at a crazy marked up
your
price.
bank account, and there you go.
And then your money is clean, right? It came from the video game. It didn't come from drugs or, weapons sales. Who the fuck knows? These guys are all connected to the Chinese government in some way because they all work for NetEase. So it's good that they're indicted because that shit is bad. But that's another thing to recognize with games as a service. And yeah, exactly. And blood diamonds, right? Like conflict minerals, like crazy shit. They could even be like fake dollars printed, right? So they could be like counterfeit bills that went into a system somehow and then came back out as this money came from a video game, right? So yeah, it's very weird. Yeah, microtransactions, the new car wash. Ramblin' is talking about Breaking Bad. That's a great example. So the reason why Walter owned the car wash is because he had to account for all that money he was getting from his drug sales. So he pushed it all through the car wash and said the car wash is making this tons of money. So obviously, at a cursory glance, that shit is very clear. It takes smart accountants to go find it, look at where it's coming from and say, hey, these numbers don't add up. I know you only had 1,000 people come in here, but you've got enough sales to account for 50,000 customers. So where the fuck is your money coming from? And that's how you catch criminals, which is fucking good. Like, we need that to happen. We need to not have like people doing crazy ass shit like that. It's just bad for all of us. So anyway, money laundering, I wanted to touch on that. And like, people don't understand, like, money laundering is not the same as embezzlement. Embezzlement is where you're stealing money from the company. Money laundering is where you're taking illegally made money and making it appear to be legal. So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. But that's pretty wild. Without getting into any like, global politics or anything, it's pretty crazy that these guys. Yeah, it was like $130 million. I'm looking for the actual numbers here. Anyway,
$39.3 million.
Yeah, that's crazy as fuck. So these guys they either did too much all at once or they've been doing this for a while. And, that could be like organized crime, It could be like a mob affiliation.
Was just like, wait, this trash Marvel game can't be making this much money. Something has to be
exactly, yeah. So, yeah, that's that whole thing. Hard Pivot, Secret Level. Do you know when that comes out, Tony?
Early December, I believe.
Okay, so Secret Level's around the corner. I'm looking at VGC, Video Games Chronicle, and they were talking about a comment from the creator of Secret Level, who was saying he hopes that the Concord episode will show the potential the game's story had. So he's standing by it. It's going to be in there.
He was speculating, shocked by the studio being closed too, because he got the impression that they were like a really solid outfit when he visited. I was reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I guess this was an interview with Rolling Stone. There were never any plans to remove the Concord episode following like the poor launch and the shutdown of the studio. This guy directed Deadpool, Terminator, Dark Fate and Love, Death and Robots. So this guy has been making some cool shit. But yeah, he's like, this sucks. These were cool people, and it sucks to see the thing explode and like it didn't work out for them. Yeah, he was saying that he's proud of the work being in his show. Yeah, and he's kind of saying like, if this is the only thing that you guys get to see from your work making this game, he's proud to at least have some part of their efforts live on, which is cool. Yeah, December 10th on Amazon Prime Video is when we get secret level.
I saw some Armored Core nerds on Twitter talking about how the small amount of preview content that they've seen from that episode looks like it is going to be super faithful to the game and the lore and all of that, which people were, I guess, worried about because FromSoft has stated that they effectively had no involvement in the project whatsoever.
Oh boy,
people were scared. They're like, "Oh God, what are they going to do?" But they showed a couple clips in the same interview that we're talking about here with the Concord stuff, and it was like, you know, the hardcore Armored Core people were able to go in and be like, I can name every part on every mech they showed. They were doing the right shit. Like, so apparently it's looking good. Let's go.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, that makes me very nervous too.
People were worried they were going to make it like Gundam or something that
is
not Armored Core. So
where they make it about like people, and Armored Core is like not really even clear on if humans exist.
Okay, well, we do know that they're showing human pilots inside the mechs, and we've seen that since like the first preview. So
that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess if I think about that, it's probably important, considering the fact that it's a single episode, right, of a show.
Hopefully an hour, but yeah.
It would be very difficult to exposit the entire time explaining that these may or may not be people and they're confused about their existence.
Made an 80-hour video game.
Yeah, it'd be the whole fucking episode on that. So just saying, no, there's people in here in this robot, I can see why as a creative, like that would be a choice you would make, because then you don't have to get into that and you can talk about other interesting things.
If I remember, it just kind of looks like Titanfall, kind of, you know, they're in a cool mech cockpit thing.
Or like Neon Genesis.
Well, that's more like you're in the goo tube where you're like neurally connected to the robot. That's a little more out there.
And it's technically not even a robot. It's like an organic being without a brain, and they put the teenage kid in there, and the kid is the brain for it.
You know, you could go the Pacific Rim where the human brain isn't strong enough to control the mech, so we need two of them to do it together, and they have to be synchronized. And
that's a very weird like narrative conceit to me, because I'm like,
very weird. Yeah,
I'm on the ride. We'll say that's a
great fucking movie, but weird conceit. Yeah.
What else do I have? I've got the Good Old Games Preservation Program. So that is classic games being released on GOG with updated or quality tested builds so that they're playable on modern systems.
That's cool.
What are your thoughts on that? Because we were talking about the N64 console, that retro thing. Like, what do you think about that? You think that's cool?
Yeah, I like for the most part, I like what GOG is doing. I do kind of see them as a fracturing of the industry in a way that I know they're kind of trying to do on purpose, because their whole thing is like DRM free and you actually own the software you buy from them and stuff. So I can get behind that. But what they're doing with that is very cool, because there's a ton of software for all sorts of old computing hardware that won't run on modern systems. And a lot of the time it isn't too hard to get it running on modern systems if you know what you're doing, but a lot of people would never take the time or energy to figure it out. So it's cool that they're effectively just kind of, I would imagine in a lot of cases, they're kind of like wrapping them in a thin emulator layer around like that old computing hardware or whatever that they're designed for, so that they'll run on Windows or whatever inside of a container. But it's archiving software for people to experience that wouldn't be able to otherwise. And hopefully the creators or publishers or something are still getting some money from the sales, and I don't see any problem with that at all. But that's awesome. That's kind of like the opposite of like having to keep your N64 cartridges around. So
like, why? I guess that's the thing that I think is interesting. What do you think is important about that? Because for me, like I was saying, I play games. I've been playing games forever. I don't really have a desire to play old games, but I'm kind of like that with books and movies too. Like, books that I've read, I almost never reread. And we talked about that a little bit. I want to say there's like 2 or 3 books that I've ever reread, because I remember them. And as soon as I start reading it again, like the entire book is revealed to me through my memories. Or if I think about that book, like I remember the whole story. So
One of the better arguments
weird
I
for
can
me.
give you for it is like, to your point, you've played all the video games and you are a game designer and you're trying to be a game designer. So you have a massive breadth of experience of the history of gaming to draw from. I would argue that somebody who's trying to become a prolific game designer in this day and age probably should experience Super Mario Bros. On the NES, for example, and understand why that was prolific for the time and why it still kind of holds up today, even though a ton of games from that era don't really. And and that's a really good example too, where like that's going to be less accessible to somebody than this GOG stuff would be, for example, because I imagine this GOG stuff will run on just about anything, maybe even a phone. Whereas if you wanted to play that Mario game, your only option right now would be to get a Switch, subscribe to the Nintendo Online thing, download the virtual console thing, and then you could play the game that way. And it would only be on the Switch on an LCD screen, or you would have to hunt down the old hardware. And so the whole conversation that we just had about like maybe you want to help somebody understand like the history of gaming or something like that, it's less accessible to them because of all of these barriers to entry and illegal emulator things and things that Nintendo has done over time to just make all of their stuff less accessible than they could have if they just had gone a different direction with it. So
what I think is very interesting about the point you just made is I consider how important reading books are to just education and like acquisition of knowledge. And I was thinking about this. Granted, I'm talking about stuff that's over 10 years old at this point, but programs that teach game design. How could you possibly take a classic? So if I'm thinking about this as like a philosophical or literature study course, how could you be like, this is the best example of these principles of game design. Here's the game, play it. This is a part of your, curriculum.
Yep.
You can't fucking do that.
But you can do that with a book or a movie.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're making a compelling case for me.
Yep.
Yeah. So now I'm starting to realize like, so the thing I was going to say is I think
effectively like censorship to some extent if you want to go that far. Like
yeah, I feel like that's a reach too far. But I hear what you're saying.
It's like in the same vein as like, I don't know, like one area that makes censorship bad is that like people kind of need to understand what the bad stuff is as well as what the good stuff is to understand everything. And this is just kind of like just preventing people access from pieces of information for somewhat arbitrary reasons. But yeah,
for like financial money, gaining more money as a business reasons. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, should video games enter public domain?
I would draw a line somewhere in like, should the piece of compiled software itself enter public domain at some point? I don't even really know what that would mean. Like, you could upload Super Mario Bros. To your website and let people play it for free and it's public domain. But like, obviously the IP of Mario and of the NES, hardware ecosystem and stuff like that, like, wouldn't enter public domain, of course. But yeah, I don't know, it's very interesting.
Anime makes a good point also. What's up, Anime? Glad to see you in chat, homie. For the majority of them, old games suck and aren't very fun. They're clunky and outdated. I try to play some old GBA games here and there, but it's hard to get sucked back in like I did in the early 2000s, knowing there are much better, newer games out there I'd rather spend my time with. So I think that's a really good point. But also to Tony's point, so, okay, two things. To Anime's point, if we're talking about like an analog being literature, a really good example is like Ulysses by James Joyce. It's not a particularly fun or interesting book to read, but if you're studying literature and the art of writing, it's very fucking cool because it's one of the first things, it is the first book that was ever written that way that had massive publication. And what I mean is, I think Ulysses takes place over the course of a 24-hour period. It's just a single day in a person's life, but the writing is literally every fucking detail of that day. So it's very compelling in that way. And there's a lot of grammatical devices that are used that are unique in Ulysses. It's also written in like this very specific like Irish dialect that's very difficult to understand. So the point that I'm making is, Ulysses is important to reading, and I would say in the same way, like we'll just grab something a little more modern in games, like Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time or Mario 64. incredibly important games for the time when they came out. So, or you could even say GoldenEye, because it was the first like stick shooter on console.
Sure.
How the fuck do you play these? How do you play these for a new generation who needs to study this stuff to understand, you know, all of the groundwork and the foundation of what game design is now without stuff like GOG, right? Preserving old software. I think that's a really interesting question.
Well, but can you, I guess then you start to get into like, could you provide the same example with Mario Odyssey that you would have with Mario 64?
I think Mario 64 is purely based on, so I haven't played Odyssey. I know you love Odyssey, but
no,
I think
I like 64.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking Sunshine. I was thinking Sunshine.
Sunshine and 64 are the best Mario games, but anyway.
Yes. And I was going to say, I think Odyssey is leaning a lot on visuals and quirky style, more so than with Mario 64. It was pure good 3D gameplay, because there was nothing 3D at the time.
Yep.
It was PC games.
30 years old, and it still feels tight and precise and correct. And yep.
Oh, anime. So anime asks, why does the new generation need to understand these games? Okay, so when we were talking about GOG, I agreed with you. My first inclination was to say that these are just a nostalgic cash grab. But as we were talking about it, I was realizing that in academia, it could be really important for game design students to study these older games to learn principles of what makes game design, you know, good or bad, like objective quality, which I think is the important part of like learning game design. Is more about, it's less about academia and like the hand wavy fuzzy concepts like human psychology, and I think it's a lot more about how to make games fun and understanding why it uses those principles. So a lot of courses of study that I'm familiar with game design degrees, so I would strongly suggest people don't get into a 4-year program for game design. I think it's still too new of a discipline. And it's famously regarded as like a scam. Like, you're paying a bunch of money for a degree that is basically useless, because no one's going to hire you because you had a degree in game design. They might now, but most of it comes down to your portfolio and what you've built. So you can literally eschew all of that and just go make shit now on your own, and you will get a job much more likely if you've made something cool and interesting, and you can demonstrate how you made it and why it matters. That goes 90% of the way to getting you hired. If you just get out of college and you don't have anything to show, you're not going to get hired. It's not like a business degree, right? Like, it just won't fucking work. So that was kind of where anime, I started to see a different value to the preservation of old games. Was you could use this for an academic course of study to teach people to be better game designers. And then there's not really a way to do that is legal now, because you know the teacher would have to have owned all these consoles and like bring in a fucking CRT and like hook it all up, right? You know, like that's some very dedicated teacher. I want to catch up on chat real quick. Nintendo's a hardware company. I can think of multiple times where they have innovated, one being the Wii, introduced gyro-based controllers, added human motion to games. Yeah, absolutely, Omni. We were talking about that. Striva saying, don't worry about trying to play E.T. Yeah. I don't think anyone needs to play E.T. to understand why it's so bad. But it's probably good to do, because then you can experience it yourself, and as like a game design student, just pick it apart and talk about all the things where they failed. But the clearest example, like there's plenty of documentaries on ET and why it failed. So you could go watch all that shit, and I'm sure you get just as much out of it. Omni, you're right. No other consoles tried to do that until Nintendo did. That's totally true. Nintendo is always taking huge risks in the hardware sector, which I think is really good about them. Anime, I already addressed that question. Ramblin says Metroid Prime still feels and looks amazing. Very true. Yeah, Strive is agreeing with studying history. Anime is saying, I feel like you can still get those lessons of what makes games fun and how to design them well with modern games. No modern shooter plays like GoldenEye. Play and study Titanfall 2's design. Yeah, I agree with that. There are many platformers that have built off Mario 64 and do 3D platforming better. Play those to study. So the way I would disagree is that those newer games are so much better made, it's harder to see the cracks and talk about where they fell down. So that's where I could see playing an old game, is because the misses are so much more apparent that you can say, like, look at this thing is bad, don't do this. And then you can talk about why they made that choice. You know, there's probably like software and hardware limitations and all kinds of other reasons why bad choices get made. I think it's really important to understand rudimentary examples and see. Yeah, exactly. That's what I just said, rambling. So yeah, catching up on that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the argument I've been making too. It's like, you're not studying GoldenEye to understand how to make a good first-person shooter, but it's good to understand that like GoldenEye was the first game that ever created like split-screen party multiplayer and made that popular, and it was the first console first-person shooter that had any level of success. And kind of, I think you could draw a line from GoldenEye on N64 to Fortnite and Warzone and Halo and, you know, the success of the first-person shooter in society to some extent, because that was one of the most popular games at the time. I remember it was the best-selling N64 game for 2 Christmas seasons in a row after it came out.
Yeah, so, and I think too,
and it's just, I think it's good to know stuff like that. And like I said in my message, I just find it kind of inspiring to kind of, you know, learn the stories of how game developers of the past came up with these ideas that have completely shaped the way that the industry looks today.
Yeah, and anime, I'm speaking strictly from an academic standpoint. I could see that being a very useful tool. And we were talking about, you know, old books or banned books, you know, and I used Ulysses as an example where Ulysses is really important to literature and how books are written. And you can read Ulysses, but how could you do that with Mario 64 without, you know, say you're like 18 years old, right? You just got out of high school. You're ready to like go make games. That's what you want to do. It's a challenge to go find and play these old games. But if you get into like a good game design program and they use those as courses of study, I could see that being very powerful to help, you know, younger generations learn from the past, know how all of these things are made. Yeah, I agree with you. GoldenEye is definitely janky because it was a single stick shooter. Yes, so I would agree that Master Chief Collection is better. So what I would do if I was designing this course of study, I would say, let's start with GoldenEye, see what they did well, what they didn't do well. Like C button controls were really fucking bad, and that's why the GameCube went to a C stick, and that was the first twin stick.
It's a great example of like the industry needed to innovate to make this better and solve this, because this was something that was clearly fun and people liked, but it wasn't that good, and it could definitely be better. So yeah,
and you can't have Halo without GoldenEye. It would not exist. So I think that's the course of study, is you say, play this, see how this worked and didn't work, and see how they got here, and then you start making the student's brain think in that way, which is really good for a game designer. So you have to start with the simple building blocks to get up to the more advanced concepts to really understand how they got there in the first place. In my experience working in AAA with other designers, there's a lot of failure to understand how things went from one place to another place, and they just emulate things that are popular in successful games now without understanding why they're popular. So I think that's the point that I'm trying to make, is like understanding why is far more important than just mimicking a successful, you know, thing that another artist did. Rather watch a 20-minute video essay on older games than play a lot of them. Absolutely. No, I agree. I'm speaking strictly about a brand new student in a course of study to become a good game designer. I think that playing old games that they don't have access to is important. Yeah, exactly. What Ramblin' was saying, you don't need to play all of GoldenEye, but just play some of it to really understand the feel, because I think that's one thing that doesn't translate really well, especially in academia around game design, is the sense you get as a player when you're playing a game. What frustrates you, what feels really good and natural. You can't, if you just talk about those things, there's shit you miss. You have to play it yourself. So anyway, I think that was a good topic of conversation. That was fun. Let's want to get over to making some Hyperskate, guys. You think we're good to go there, Tony?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, snek time. So stream title's a little silly, but I was like, no surf snek or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so last week I was working on these ramps and making these rampy guys do ramp things that I wanted, which is very cool. I didn't get into the snake run, so I'm going to build out this snake run. This is an exploration of how this tool is updated and what I can do with it. So we're going to find out together, chat. Let's see. And Tony, you were saying the way I can go from like wide to thin is like changed a little bit, maybe.
It should kind of work. Some stuff is probably not going to look like totally right, but it's stuff where just set it up the way that you're going to want it to the best of your ability, and as I push changes, it'll just start looking better and better. So.
All right, this is something I couldn't do in the last snake run. I had no elevation changes, really. It was more like flat. Okay, so chat. What I did before is I made it so that as you're coming down the slalom through this valley, you hit this gate, hit this ramp, you're up in the air. You have to be careful about how you enter this next gate and go into the snake run. So that's the player choice that I'm trying to go for here, is making that feel a little bit better. I got some weird curves in this ramp, so I'm just trying to straighten those out a bit. Tony, I'm seeing this like deformation here. See how it's like splitting the bottom and the sides? What do you think I should do to fix that a little bit as I try to curve this? It also might be because it's going up and curving.
Show me again now. Okay, I got it up. You might just need to, you know,
see this?
Just wiggle the points around a little bit.
I did.
Yeah.
So I think it's because I'm going up and curving. So I might have to go up and then flat and then curve.
Well, and if it's getting weird, like I'll fix it. So just make it the way that you want it to be, and I'll make it look good eventually. So just, you know, or do what you're saying, and just the more points you add, the more data it will have to work with. So, you know, you might just need to add a couple more points to kind of give it some more wiggle, and that might help. But I'll clean it up afterwards. You making stuff like this gives me more kind of like test cases to make sure are functioning the way they're supposed to.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, then we'll pull this point out. Yeah, as I pull the Bezier handles, it like cuts the middle out. I don't know if you can see this like seam opening in the middle.
Yeah, it's because everything's like a modular panel, and it's kind of like a flat point between A and B, but now there's a twist, you know? So yeah. I should be able to fix it, but just do what you can for now.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, so let's get this guy a little more flat. I want to go up a bit. Pull this one back.
Chat, we were playing this game called Echo Point Nova last night. It's on Steam, and it's kind of like Flat screen, first person shooter, hyperskate. It's interesting. Definitely does a lot of stuff different than what we've been talking about doing, but you have hoverboard and you go very fast and you can fly around this big open world thing. It's pretty fun.
All right, we'll do that. Let's go back here. I need to add some walls. And some roof. Oh yeah, Tony, I think whatever changes you pushed might have made this weird, because like now I'm not getting the curve on the outside wall. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
It's all good. I'm gonna just adjust it.
Yep.
I'll just keep going.
I'll have to keep messing with it.
Yeah, no worries, dude.
I think
Ooh,
I actually
idea.
can kind of think right now exactly what that problem probably is. So.
There we go. If I pull the handle in, it tightens up that seam a little bit. Actually, I wonder. I'm gonna go look at the these ramps and see if they got weird. Yeah, these ramps got weird too. Okay, cool.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, so I think if you, as you're working on the tool, if you like use these ramps as an example, I think that'll help.
Yep. Some of that might actually be fixed. I pushed since we've been talking, but you don't need to pull it right now. So
yeah, no worries. All right, and then we'll pull this one out. Let's get this one curving that way.
Chat, this whole tool is just math, and it makes my brain hurt.
I keep making Tony do math. I'm sorry, Tony.
That's okay, but it's been a lot of math.
Yeah, I'm gonna go for like just some spline shape fidelity, I think. So like this is the way I want it to go, and then I'll let you work on the math that fixes it. Cool. Yeah, I agree, Anna. Math is not something I enjoy.
If you want to be a game developer specifically, it's just pretty much all math.
Yeah, there's a lot of math in it, and there's not a whole lot of math in other kinds of software dev.
Yeah. Yeah, in web dev, I've never had to do almost any math except for like specific like reporting statistics needs and stuff of, you know, things like that. But just the most basic game dev stuff is vectors and math and stuff that you probably learned in high school and completely forgot about.
Especially because it's all like 3D space stuff.
Yes. You're like multiplying lines together and stuff. It's crazy shit. Yeah, I mean, the AI for Math Omni definitely has been very helpful because, like, to some extent, I don't know when I'm supposed to be using a cosine over like a tangent or something when I'm doing certain trigonometry things and stuff. And while I could probably figure it out, it's a lot easier to just ask Claude, and he's just like, yeah, use this one. So I probably wouldn't ask the AI to actually do the equations. I bet it would just make some shit up and lie, but
eat hot chip. Claude eats McDonald's hot chip, charges its phone, and lies.
There you go.
All right, buddy. Why did you do that? I don't need you doing that. Is it this one? This one. All right, chat. So let's give this a little ride. Oh, this would be cool. Catch a little bit of air, hit the sidewall here. Okay, so I need to come down and cruise around. So what I'm trying to do is like send the player this way and then curve back to the right. I think I want to go up more. I want to go up so that we can go really fast on the way out. Really fast on the way out might be bad though, because you're like, I remember old Snake Run when you came out of here, you like overshot this very often. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. It'll be fun. We'll figure it out.
Go back in the tube real quick. I just want to look at the problems. Okay, so the left side should be in better shape than the right side generally.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems to be the case for the most part.
It's like the outside of the curve is getting funky.
Okay, but that one is fucked up. Okay. All right.
So inside of the curves seem happier than outside of the curves. Except for the floor.
It's funny, I spent so much time testing like one spline point going from like 500 width to 5,000 width and like making sure that all looks good. And then you're just going in and kind of like using it normally and it's just completely falling apart.
Yeah. It's okay. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chat. That's one thing. Like, if you guys are watching this and you're wondering about like what the process is for being a game designer working with engineering, you got to just fucking know that this shit is hard. You know, like this is hard. So I got to be like, here's where it's not working, Tony. You know,
yep.
That's the way it goes. And I got to give him the space to fucking fix it. And like, when you're working in a AAA environment, you have a bunch of people doing a bunch of different things. Like, it can be really frustrating. It can be difficult, but like we're on the same team. And I've experienced it a few times where people forget that shit and they get really mad at engineering. And it's like, dude, you wouldn't have anything without this guy. Like the people making these tools for you are super fucking important. So, you know, respect that their job is hard. Your job is hard too, but they're very different kinds of challenges. So I'm not saying I'm frustrated with Tony here, because I'm not at all. It's just more like I've been in this position, you know? And I recall like early on.
It's probably good to your point not to not have understanding about it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you got to be like, you know, talk to your producers, talk to the people who are like, you know, pushing on you for your deadlines and whatnot, and say, like, my workflow is dependent on this tool. You know, I need this tool to work. It's better to just talk to the engineer. I personally think just they're people. If you're involving a third party, like someone else has a different job too, and you're basically making more work for someone else. So just work with your team, you know, be homies, like do cool shit, get the job done. I think that's the point that I'm trying to make, is like, you're not adversaries. Like you guys are on the same team. What am I doing here? I'm like fucking all this up. It'll be all right. All right, what did I do? Come in here, hit that, ride the sidewall. Okay, this is cool. That's what I wanted. I want the player to switch to the other wall, so I'm going to pull out a point here. And we're going to go this way. All right, so now I'm going to need to come down and make this a really tight curve in the other direction. So yeah, chat, I'm really putting Tony's tool through its paces right now. I'm doing stuff that I've never done with the spline tool. But, you know, we agreed, like, let's just.
I told him to do this, yeah. So
yeah, just beat on it, see where it breaks.
Yeah, so while you're doing this, I went into the map and I just grabbed those splines that were looking really janky up on the gate run and brought those over. So those will be good tests to try to figure out what the hell's going on.
Sweet. Let's see, do I have anything that I can do to... Yeah, let's lower this quality. My video quality might be a little too high, making my machine grumpy because I'm also streaming.
Mm-hmm.
There we go, it seems to be a little bit better. And I have like... So chat, I have my mod window, I have creator dashboard, I have YouTube, and I have the regular stream up. So I've got like several instances of the stream going. I think it's just the graphics processor, honestly. Anime is grumpy because I'm making it like render a bunch of different resolutions for live video from streaming, and I'm also streaming and I'm running an editor. Yeah, I need more GPU. 3080 Ti is not quite enough. I mean, it's just, I don't know if you guys can see it, but this is not like buttery smooth right now, but that's okay. We know that. All right, so I've got this guy. I want to pull his handle a little in this direction, I think.
Oh, man. Okay. Mm-mm. You're welcome, Josh. What my brain is going through right now, trying to figure out what I'm going to do about this.
Oh man, okay. Yeah, Tony's living a life right now. He's going through it.
Just your little, like, 25-foot quarter pipe sections up on that ramp just like do so many things that break everything I did, but that's okay. Kind of helps me figure out what I need to do next.
Oh, it's so grumpy about this kink I just put into the snake run. Oh man. All right, and then let's go. We'll pull out this next point.
It's cool, chat. We're gonna bring this back here one of these days, and it'll be what he made, but it'll look right. I promise. No, he's not making my life harder. It's good. So this tool worked fairly well for what we had, but we wanted it to do more, and so I've added so much to it, and now it's kind of not working right anymore. But we'll get it back. I can always just roll it back in Perforce too, worst case.
Yeah, Perforce is very good. Very, very good tool. Perforce is the industry standard source control. I would show you guys how it's connected, but I'm not about to dox myself because it shows the IPs and everything. So I can't do that, unfortunately. But if you look down in the bottom right, underneath this whole panel, you see revision control with a green checkbox. That means that what I'm working on, actually, I'm going to save this. What I'm working on is connected to our source control, which lives out in the cloud. So our whole project is backed up on, servers out in the internet, and yeah.
And it's integrated into Unreal with that thing that he was showing you in the corner. And what that means is while he's working on something, it will lock it. And since my Unreal is also connected to it, it will let me save over something that he actively has checked out so that we don't have any conflicts or anything.
Yeah, code conflicts are much easier to resolve than content conflicts. Content conflicts, yeah, that usually means someone is redoing their work. So that's why it's really important to have good source control, like Perforce, which is the industry standard, because then you avoid like getting into those spots where I have spent an entire workday on something and I wasn't paying attention to who had what checked out, and then like my entire day is lost and I have to redo everything. And as a designer, when you're doing creative things, that can be like, you'll never make that shit again.
Oh yeah, if you're talking about a 3D model or even a blueprint or anything in Unreal, if there's a conflict like that, there is no way to resolve it. You have to pick one version and the other one is unusable, unfortunately. Really unfortunate. So Perforce definitely helps to alleviate that to some extent if you use it correctly, which is good.
I definitely worked on a project where we had Perforce and there was no exclusive checkout set on the project, and I was like, guys, don't do that. Like, it just make it exclusive checkout so that no one else can get this file. And there were like data tables and shit that were like really important that needed to be, exclusive checked out because
is this Moria
people. No, I think this was one of the golf games I worked on. But yeah, it was crazy. And of course, like, because we ran into so many conflicts that had to be undone and fixed because it just was not functioning correctly for the team. Let's see. We're pretty flat here. We're flat here now. Yeah, we're not in the... Okay, cool. Pull that point out. Yeah, Shank Stars, bro. I was trying not to name names, but yeah, I mean, I guess game is canceled at this point, right? I don't think it's even live anymore, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, that was a Unity game, and oh boy. When you have like systems designer working in a spreadsheet, setting all like the character shit and unlocks and stuff like that, and yeah, it's just bad. Or my team of level designers like checking out, not exclusively checking out a level file, and like I went over and like did something to it and then went back and like we had to throw my work away, right? I would always choose that as the lead for sure, because I'm fine redoing my work. But I'm not going to have my juniors who spent like an entire day working on something go like, fuck, dude, oh, I'm freaking out. I can't remake this again. I'm like, just keep your stuff. I'll redo my stuff. It's totally okay. So yeah, that stuff is scary. Source control is very important. What was the Power World source control? Was a trash can full of USB drives or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. I don't know why that ended up being what they went with, but I think it was that they were putting a version of the source on each drive, labeling them and putting them into a bucket, basically. So if they had to go back to a version, they could just find that USB.
Final.jpg.
Yep.
Pal World final. Let's see. Pull this out a little more. There we go. Okay.
I find it funny too, because it's just like, guys, you made a video game that's multiplayer that shipped on Steam and sold millions of copies. Like, you couldn't have just figured out Perforce. Like, you're clearly capable of it.
I'm guessing that they didn't think they were going to sell millions of copies.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you don't know what you don't know either. Like, they may not even have heard of Perforce. So I may not have heard of it if not for, probably asking you in like 2017, like, hey, what do you use for this? And you're like, Perforce. I'm like, okay, I'll go learn that.
Yeah, weren't the Power World guys like college kids too? And they were like, just working on
their main 3D animator was like a dude in high school, but I think the actual like founder guys of the studios are like, older. So like they said they like paid a dude that they met at 7-Eleven to make the 3D models, and he was like 16 or something.
Nice.
Or he worked at 7-Eleven, maybe something like that.
Yeah, and they used to go there and get like snacks for the dev cycle.
And they started talking about their project, and he was like, I can model, and they're like, oh, do you want to model for us, basically? And there you go.
They came out with a game called Craftopia in 2020. It was basically the same game without Pokemon. Okay.
Oh my god, I was telling Vince this. I tried to play Enshrouded the other day, which is kind of this like survival crafting game that just got this big update that's supposed to add a bunch of stuff to it, and I was just looking for something to play and was bored. And I ended up returning it on Steam after like 20 minutes because it was just playing Pal World again, but without the Pokemon and just kind of like a slightly more fantasy setting. But interface felt the same. Controls felt exactly the same because it was made in Unreal like Power World, and then Power World is just very derivative of Arc, and I guess Craftopia is probably derivative of Arc in the first place, which is kind of derivative of Rust or vice versa. So it's just like it didn't feel like there was a single original thought in this entire game, and I was just bored so quickly. It was crazy, and I don't know. It kind of concerning almost that I don't know why it keeps happening, but.
We were talking about that a little bit. I think the survival crafting games as a genre don't have a lot of innovation in them. There's a ton of room to like reimagine what that means. Speaking frankly, as someone who worked on Moria, I was hoping for that in Moria. But as the dev cycle got longer, as the budgets got bigger, as the ship dates changed, all those really cool features just got really pared down and brought down to like, well, this is what people have already shipped and this works. So that's why you get that very
generic.
Generic. Yeah, it feels like a survival crafting game. If you are familiar with survival crafting games, Moria is a familiar game. You're not going to be like
Abiotic kind of did maybe some unique things that you don't really see in the genre too much, that it feels like Moria could have kind of like gone the same direction, because instead of being outside, you're in an enclosed space with like a lot more limitations than nature would give you normally. But yeah, I don't know. And like Enshrouded looks like it's probably a good game if you want to play a game like that. Don't get me wrong. It looks like it's huge and it has a ton of content and there's lots to do, but it just like down to playing the actual game and moving around and using the menus and stuff, like it felt like all those other games I said one-to-one, because my theory is that there's a very popular and pretty expensive survival crafting game asset pack on the marketplace. I think it's like $300 or something, but it comes with the whole setup top to bottom, destructible environment things that drop resources and the inventory and the crafting and the dropping buildings and stuff. And I just have to imagine a lot of these games kind of start from that place, and that's why they all end up kind of feeling the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably right, honestly. There we go.
And inevitably that person, I almost need to go look and see who actually published it, but it's like that person probably just looked at a popular survival game of the time like Ark and was like, I'm just gonna make it like that. And here we are.
Okay, they came out. It's more Breath of the Wild like. I almost bought that too. Good to know. It's the evolution of the Roblox Minecraft generation. I feel like ship games with generic combat-based building. Yes, totally. I mean, that's what fucking Fortnite is, and they just made it a battle royale. Yep. And that, because it was a battle royale, that was the innovation, right? It was a very understandable, recognizable survival crafting game. And then they just put a good spin on it. So you don't need to do super crazy stuff to be successful in games. I personally like doing super crazy stuff and having really crazy big ideas. That's just how I am. But you can definitely make something that is very similar to other stuff that's already out there, and it's just fine. $3D Terraria, that would be very weird.
I just mean, like, instead of innovating Minecraft into a battle royale, basically, it's like somebody could innovate Minecraft into like more of a game with some depth, like Terraria is. And it's never been done.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think Terraria is one of the better survival crafting games, just because of like all the.
It's so deep. There's so much.
The power progression and stuff, and like the different gear you can get. Like you can go into play styles. They're all valid. They all have like completely, one of the things that matters in survival crafting games is that the player, through their crafting, can become insanely powerful. And I think Terraria does that better than a lot of those other games because they have crazy bosses. They have like bullet hell bosses, and that's really fucking cool.
There's like 60 bosses now or something.
Yeah, there's literally like 60 bosses in the game, and I can't think of another survival crafting game that does that. And you know, one of the advantages that Realogic has is that they've been making that game, or I should say like Redender has been making that game for a very long time, and there's one designer. It's Redender, the guy who is like, you know, he's the founder of the company, and yeah, he's very carefully preserving his singular vision for the game, and I think that's probably why it has such a unique feel to it. When you start getting more designers into a project, they all start exerting their own influence on the project and saying like, I think we should do this, I think we should do that. They all have different agendas. People start building different things, and it really falls. That's where the importance of a creative director comes into play, especially with like a larger design team. You need the person holding the vision to really fucking understand what they're trying to make, because that's the person who aligns all those different viewpoints in the right direction so that everyone's making the same thing. I've witnessed that fail so many times in projects. So vision's very, very important. It's a weird, ambiguous thing to talk about too, and it's very specific to every creative director. Yeah. I think we're gonna go out straight here. Yeah, next point I pull out will curve. Chat, save early, save often, save all the fucking time. You never know when your engine's gonna crash. And that's true of even the best tools.
Wow, just talking into a muted mic. Yeah, I was gonna say like, the levels will get you every time, because the blueprints you compile on save and stuff like that. You're saving often, but the levels, you can go an hour without hitting the button, and you're just kind of relying on the autosave, and the Unreal autosave isn't that good in my opinion, and it is really annoying and freezes the whole engine up for a second. So.
Yeah, and I have, thankfully in my career, I've not had too many instances of that, but I think the worst, I lost like an hour and a half of work. That was probably on Destiny, and that was all on me. I was just doing shit and like working, and then I hit a really weird edge case because I hadn't saved, and I'd started doing something with design markup. And what design markup is like setting up a trigger volume or like an area for AI to use activity points, which is like a concept of there's this procedurally generated grid, and combatants will like walk over and stand in a spot and like fight from there. So you, as an encounter designer working on a game like Destiny, that's a big part of what I did. I would have to script all that, set up the combatants, say where they would spawn in, where they would go fight from, tune their behaviors to say, well, they're fighting from here until X condition occurs, and then they move over there. So I set up all this like framework stuff with the idea that I had in my head. And then as I started getting into these things and like fucking with conditions for how combatants fight, I feel like that's when it crashed and everything got blown up. So I had to take, the process of like chiseling the statue out of the marble and go like, okay, well, I made some chisel marks that I didn't like that time, so let's do it different this next time. And so I was faster remaking it, but I still lost a bunch of that work. And my idea was stronger in the end, but it was just...
I'm sure you probably did a lot of exercises like that in art school and stuff where...
Yeah.
you kind of, you have to like do stuff and just like throw it in the trash when you're done, basically, or something
Yep.
like that, because it's better not to ever get too attached to something that you're doing, so that you can like keep your mind open for better ways, or other things that you might do better and stuff. But that's a hard thing to learn in art.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's a good point. I probably have that bit of resilience to that from art school. And from like, a whole career in tech support and stuff, like all the work that I did for better part of a decade, before I even started making games, was like, this is not permanent. This person might call back later, and
Yep.
you're going to have to fix their problem again.
And just stuff like you're talking about is going to happen and will never stop happening. And you need to just like, I don't know. I think there's some people who would get to a situation where 3 hours of their work got deleted, and they're just like, I'm done. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to go through the effort of putting that back together and stuff. And you just need to not be like that, because it's going to happen. And just go, okay, well, I guess we're going to try to do it better this time. Now we know what to do. So
Yeah, especially. Yeah, that's the big takeaway. You go, what did I learn through this process? How can I do it better? Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I'm really going to say that I think having that resiliency to that process probably came from playing competitive games.
I was gonna say, it is like playing a game and just dying and having to start over and do the whole thing again. And I know you're a person who can do that 1,000 times, no problem. So
Yeah, and I definitely get frustrated. There were points. I will say this, like, I don't think I ever really got frustrated with Ultra Kill. I got to a point where I was like, I'm fucking up. I'm doing something wrong. And like what I'm trying to have happen isn't happening. And then when I realized that, I got through some sticky spots. Like, what was the longest fight that I was on? It was the first fight against Gabriel, right? And
I
chat
thought it was like maybe your first one against like V2 or something. But yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of the dude flying around like with the sword and shit, because I fought him for a while, and I was thinking that might have been the spot where I was like a little frustrated. Chat was like, "Hey, try flicking the coin in the air and switching to the railgun and like do it all 4 times and like make sure that you can hit all that." And I was like, "That's not going to work for me because I'm flying around trying to not die." So then I just committed to my strategy, and then I executed my strategy, and it worked. But I was definitely at a point of like, this isn't working. I'm doing something wrong. And then I just got better at what I was trying to do. And that was the key. I think that's probably a good lesson for like all creative endeavors, right? Get better at what you're trying to do. Like Tony works in Unreal every day.
Trying different stuff and learning new things. Yeah.
Yeah. Tony works in Unreal every day, learns new shit, and gets stronger at the engine. And so like that's why he's able to build this crazy spline tool for me. Sure, it's not working exactly like we want right now, but the fact that he's able to build this to streamline my process is fucking crazy. Like, I would have never ever had this type of a resource working in a bigger studio, because Tony needs to go write code for other things. Tony needs to do some other shit.
Yeah, you have to be building this with static meshes, basically. And
yes.
Fucking horrendous amalgamation of trash at the end that we would have to do something with. Yeah.
And the way I would do it is, so speaking frankly, if this were a task that I had, it was like, go build some fun skate park stuff, and I only had blockout tools, there's no way I would be making a snake run. I would never do it. It would take hundreds of hours of time, and proving whether or not it was fun to play would be very difficult considering the time spent to build it in the first place. So as a designer, I wouldn't have done that. I would have been like, that's a non-starter. We can't build snake runs. And I'm sure that there would have been another designer who would have strongly disagreed with me and been like, no, dude, snake run's really important. We got to fucking build snake run. And I'd be like, cool, man, have fun. I'm not going to spend that much time doing that because we don't even know if it's good. It might not be fun. Like that's crazy to get so deep on this idea. And I think maybe that's what I mean about like game designers and like needing to understand why things get made the way they get made. And that's definitely a problem endemic to game design as a discipline. Is there are a lot of people who have ideas that are untested, but they force them into games. And when they do that, you guys as gamers have all seen the products. They're not great. And you're like, how the fuck did they miss this? Well, the answer is that simple. They didn't know. They were trying to be, take a risk and do something new and interesting. And when they did that, it wasn't a good bet. And they couldn't play it and they couldn't see how it was working, so they just didn't know. So what's the concept? Fail fast. I think that's in Ed Catmull's book. Ed Catmull was one of the founders. So the book is called Creativity Inc. I think I have it over on my bookshelf. I'm looking for it right now. He was one of the guys at Pixar. I'm stuck because I didn't want to say the wrong thing. So he's one of the main guys at Pixar who helped Pixar go from an unknown studio and an experiment by some graphics companies, PC companies, computing companies, technology companies, into making a movie with no live actors. So Pixar is the first entity to ever have done that. And it was very risky. So understanding how to get, these exorbitant costs in order to build this specific technology, in order to make this thing actually real, required pioneering leadership. So Ed Catmull wrote a book about how he managed Pixar and how he did all these things. One of the core concepts was failing fast. So if you have a cool idea and you want to build something interesting, how do you get to the point where you can build that idea as quickly as possible so that it's in like a testable or consumable format so that you know if this idea is strong? So that's the point of failing fast. It's not to say you should make as many mistakes as possible. You shouldn't do that, but you should be able to take big risks and prove how risky they are or how good the idea is as quickly as possible. Because when you're taking risks, your chance for failure goes up. So it's not about saying you need to fail. It's about eliminating the consequences of failure with a cool idea. That's a really good book too. If anyone is interested in like the formation of Pixar and the history of the company and like how the company went and even did what it was doing, it's very interesting to read about. There's in fairness, this book is generally recommended by like business leader types. So I heard about it from leadership at, I want to say it was Bungie probably. They were like, this is the book we're reading to help us be better leaders. I think another one is called like Servant Leadership, which I have not read, but I think it's pretty clear that the Bungie leadership was not taking anything out of those books that helped them be better. So everything with a grain of salt, I guess, right? Bro, this snake run is getting real snaky right now. I think I need to chill out all the curves. So I'm going to come back. I'm going to loop back around myself here and go into this area. So I'm going to curve back, get low, make a nice big sweeper and some long straight. So I've talked about like game design stuff. I'm a little worried this is way too curvy. So I'm going to go fly through it and see how this feels. It's probably going to feel bad. Let's deselect that and see if that's a little faster. There we go. So we're zooming through here. We're going to probably ride up on this wall because you're going real fast at this point, which is cool. And then I put in a switchback so that you hit this wall, and now you're going to ride on the opposite wall. You're going to come up a little bit, so you'll probably stay on the outside here in this lower section of the wall. This is a lot of turning. Yeah, I need to straighten this out. This is a lot of turning. Okay, and then we're coming out here. Okay, so we're going to curve right and drop down. I need to make these curves less tight. So the next set of curves are going to be a little more wide instead of super tight apexes. So we're going to grab that point. Let's get a little bit of a straight line here. Come out to about there.
Chat, while Vince is finishing that up, do you guys have any thoughts or opinions about games tomorrow? I think the options are either going to be more Half-Life, which I'm definitely down to do if you guys want to do more Half-Life. Vince and I could probably play this Echo Point Nova game that we've been talking about, or something completely different. But I'm definitely down to keep going on Half-Life if we want to do that.
Yeah, I vote Half-Life. I think people were really enjoying that, Tony. Like, I was enjoying watching you play Half-Life. Yeah, Adder, what's up, Adder? Adder says Half-Life.
And then do you guys vote I try to get through Half-Life 1 and keep going there, or should I jump to Alex?
Oh yeah, so yeah, this is a good question, chat, because we hit what appears to be like a bug with the mod.
Which I'll figure it out. Like if I have to like flat screen through that section and then go back into VR, or even just play it in flat screen from there, we can do that. I would like to play the whole thing in VR though. So
yeah, finish Half-Life 1 or go to Half-Life 2. Yeah,
and at the end, I got to this elevator where I was going up to one of the surface sections and my game bugged, and then whenever I would reload, it was still bugged, and I couldn't get on the elevator to get up to the top of this thing. So it's probably something where I can just go in and play it. I'm pretty sure I can start that save in flat screen. Worst case, I can like no clip fly up to the top of the elevator, save the game, and then open it back up in VR or something. So
to give you guys an idea
how much Half-Life 1 I have left, but yeah.
And to give you guys an idea of the issue we ran into, it looked like a load trigger and the trigger for the elevator were out of sync. So every time he would like try to load the elevator section, he was like beyond the trigger for the elevator, and if you backed up to hit the trigger for the elevator, it would hit a load trigger.
When I would load, the elevator was like halfway up the shaft or something, and I was at the bottom. And then to Vince's point, as the elevator goes up, the game is doing something where it's like unloading the room at the bottom of the elevator to load the one at the top, and I was still at the bottom, so I was unloading the room around me, which is very weird. I was just totally stuck.
So that might be the only strong argument for Half-Life 2 instead.
But we would go Alex and then 2, but yeah.
So what do you think, chat? Alex or try to continue with Half-Life 1? I think that's the open question.
I guess there is the option too of playing Blue Shift or Opposing Force before we go to Alex as well, if you guys really want to see all the classic stuff. But at this point, I don't feel very strongly. I'm happy to go to Alex if that's going to be maybe more entertaining. I've never finished Alex, for what it's worth. I've probably played over half of it, but haven't ever gotten to the end.
I would say chat, first person to answer is what we're doing.
You guys have never had so much power.
So Half-Life Alex or continue with Half-Life 1? Boom! Adder says Half-Life 2. Okay.
Okay.
So
Half-Life 2 wasn't an option, and then,
yeah,
and then Josh said Half-Life 1, so it might be Half-Life 1 then.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Adder, since you were in first, do you want to do Alex or continue Half-Life 1?
We will definitely do Half-Life 2. I'm probably looking forward to that the most, but we're doing them in chronological order. So
okay, cool. Well, let's try to fix Half-Life 1. It seems like everyone was down with that. I mean, it was really cool watching you play it, so I was down too.
I don't know how long the game is, but I kind of feel like at the pace I was going, hopefully it's, maybe only like one more session or two.
Hey, you're doing pretty well. You need to fight more. I feel like there's some enemies that you haven't seen yet. And you haven't
I haven't gone to Zen at all yet. I know I go in and out of Zen a couple times, and
yeah. And when you come back out, you end up outside of the facility.
And I haven't gotten like any of the cool guns yet either. Half-Life 1 has really cool guns.
Tony, is that the music or is that the police?
That's the music.
Okay. I could just hear like some vague police sounds, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, kind of sounds like that for sure.
Police. They're coming to get you, Tony.
I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not too. Whoops. Okay, we'll go here. I don't know anything about Project Borealis.
Oh yeah, I saw a little bit of it. Yeah, that it is a fan Half-Life 3 basically.
I'm gonna be right back too.
Okay. But yeah, Project Borealis is a fan game that is supposed to be kind of effectively what Half-Life 3 was supposed to be, and I don't think it's Valve sanctioned. Because what happened with Half-Life 3 or Episode 3, I guess it's Half-Life 2 Episode 3, is that they were supposed to make it, but famously Valve can't count to 3, as everybody knows. And the original writer of Half-Life and Half-Life 2, Mark Laidlaw, stopped working at Valve around the end of Episode 2, but he had written Episode 3, and then he basically posted his story of Episode 3 on his own website after he had left Valve. And he named it Epistle 3, and he changed the names of all of the stuff in it to be vaguely different than what the Half-Life stuff is named. So instead of Gordon Freeman, this isn't what it actually is, but it's just something like, Jordan Foreman and, Alexis Vander or something instead of Alex Vance. And but it effectively just tells the story of how in Half-Life lore, Aperture Science had created this teleportation technology, and they had put it on this boat called the Borealis. And you kind of learn about this in Portal 2 a little bit. And ultimately, they basically were able to take this entire giant steel warship and teleport it to the Arctic, kind of on accident. But this is technology that the Combine really wants, and so the story of Half-Life 3 was supposed to be like Gordon and Alex going up to the Arctic to try to effectively take this technology from the Combine. And yeah, I think they're supposed to then teleport the ship to the Combine homeworld and crash it into it or something at the end, but it's all non-official canon. It's just what the writer said, this is what we had written when I was there and what we were going to do for Episode 3. If they were going to make it at this point, they probably wouldn't even use this, they would have changed it, but this is what it was supposed to be. So I've talked a little bit in the past about there's a YouTube channel that does really, really good Half-Life lore, and that's where I had learned all of this, because I started looking into it because I knew we were going to be playing the games, and I wanted to kind of get up on what the story was and what was going on there. So it'll be interesting to see what the fan-made game ends up being like, but I would imagine it just, hopefully tries to follow that story as best as I can.
All right, I'm back. I got an idea for what I want to do with the snake run a little bit, so I'm gonna open this up after we loop back around and try to put a huge bowl in the middle. So that means I'll have to do your this width out to this width and then bring it back in. And I want to pop the top off of it too, so I think it'd be cool. So this, we're gonna go a little bit longer if that's cool with you, Tony, because I want to finish what I'm doing with this thing. Cool.
Anime, would they be able to post it on Steam if it's not Valve sanctioned? I mean, to that point, Valve probably doesn't have a big enough problem with it to stop it from existing, and they were like that with Black Mesa as well, where that was just kind of a remaking of Half-Life 1, but they, I think, kind of just said at a point well, we're not going to do it, so we'll let you do it and we'll give you our blessing. So I don't know if there's some agreement where there's a revenue share or something for the IP, but this kind of seems like it's in that vein as far as I can tell. I'm gonna step away for a second. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries. I pulled a Bezier handle. Damn it. Let's see. I'm gonna kill this and that. I'm gonna try to get some perf back here, chat. Oh, also chat, rate my 25-year-old shirt. It used to be black. It's kind of gray now. It's like, this is black. This is like a light gray. Yeah. Original System of a Down album release shirt. I think I bought it at like a Zoomies or something back in the day. When I was in high school, probably. Yeah, I think I was like, shit, this might be like a 26-year-old shirt. My face when my shirt is older than chat. I know that's not true. I know we got some fellow old people in here. I appreciate y'all. Imagine thinking video games are for kids. All right, so let's see. Where was I going with this? I need a nice big sweeping curve for this one because I have a lot of like really tight back and forth in the early section. So what I'm going to do here is continue to stretch out these points a little bit. So we'll go like over there. And then we'll take this guy. Oh yeah, I'll come back underneath it. That'll be the way. Oh shit, I'm angling down. That's not what I wanted. I'm glad I went to this view. Let's get you. Why are you being weird, handle? That's better. Much better. Okay. Chat, one of the things you can do if you're trying to set things up to be like exactly on flat planes or whatnot is just go to the, you know, this view, the quad view, and then switch to like, what is this one? Top. And this is just a top down view. So that can make it a little bit easier. But let's see, we'll make this big. Kind of hard to see what the fuck I got going on here. Oh, I'm in a totally different spot of the map, so we'll ignore that. We'll just go back to perspective view. We're good. We'll just pretend we didn't see that. I knew what I was looking at, but you guys didn't know what I was looking at.
You can hit F in top-down view too, and it'll center it for you.
Yeah, I was like, chat, you know, this can be a cool way to see like what you're doing, so you know where your planes are at, and you can like switch to side view and shit like that. So
I gotta go help Amy with something, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, you're good. So what I was doing, chat, was I was looking at this and how I had like some different height variations, and I realized that this was angling down more than I wanted it to. So I was just trying to straighten that out. So now what I'm going to do is move this sucker over here a bit. Yeah, that seems good. And then we'll pull on these handles, come out a bit, and then we'll go that way. Yeah, getting a nice sweeper here instead. I know what we're going to do. Okay, so chat, we're going to come around this direction, get flat, and go that way. And then out here, we're going to make a big bowl shape. So it'll be like this big open top, you know, yeah, a bowl in like a skate park nomenclature. So it's like a swimming pool. We'll kind of have that out in the middle. this is really pushing Tony's tool to the limit. So let's see. We were going to go out here and loop that way. Okay. Pull this in. Grab that guy. Pull out another point. Where did my mouse go? Okay, there it is. And I'm doing this with low perf, which is not great, but you know, that's how it goes. It's a little more harsh than I wanted it, so let's pull this out. There we go. Yeah, Tony, I wonder if perf is not great because every time I move these points, it's like doing a ton of recalculating.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's doing
okay.
Probably like a million calculations or something.
Yeah, so anytime I pull this, the frame rate is very low.
Watching you do this has given me a lot of insight into how I need to change it, but it's kind of big changes now that I see it. So I will have to keep iterating on this, but yeah.
So what I'm going to do is pull this out into this corner. I'm going to loop back the other way. So I'm going to make this curve down into this area, drop low, go over here, and then build the big bowl out in the middle here. And then we'll call it at that point. So there's probably like another 30 more.
Click your main spline real quick in your outliner on the right. And I just want to see what your section length is at. 5,000. Okay, yeah, that should be fine.
Yeah, see, it's much happier when I don't have the spline point selected, so I can like move around and the frame rate's not bad. But yeah, when I click on
because for every point, it is calculating like 12 different meshes, and then it's breaking those into sections. And yeah, it's probably not very efficient right now.
It's okay. It's working. I mean, it's helping me make this like,
yeah,
in an hour, a little over an hour, making something like this is crazy. If I was just using primitives, this would take me days. All right. So let's get this, bring this in a little more. Oh, of course, and now it wants to autosave right when I was doing that. So now it's going to be extra grumpy. Let's see where I'm at here. Pull this in. I don't think that's what I wanted. That was a Bezier handle. Yeah, let's undo that. Let's go just a little bit. That's better. Grab this thing, pull this out. I'll go to about here. There. Oh, you just didn't fucking do what I wanted you to do, did you? There we go. Another point out to about there. Yeah, so chat, if you remember, I was saying that this is too twisty here and we needed to widen this out. So this will be a nice long sweeper in this direction. Then you come out there. So yeah, we'll take a ride through it and it'll make more sense. You know, and I say when I take a ride, it'll be like me driving the camera and stuff. So we'll go here. Pull this in a bit. Yeah, it's looking good. Okay. Pull this out to about there we go. All right, so we're going to be a little tight. We need to start coming down. Oh, I don't want to do the Bezier handle. Whoops. This should be pretty cool with this downward slope. It will probably make the player's speed way up. So as they shoot this way and go into the bowl, they'll be going really fast. So that should be cool. All right. Let's see. We'll pull this in a little bit. That makes it grumpier. That's gonna be okay. Save again. We clear, yeah. We're above the water. Yeah, cool. All right, that's looking good. All right, Tony, moment of truth. Going out into the big bowl.
Good luck.
It's gonna be great, dude. Okay, so we got this. Let's go here. Get rid of top. Top left, top right. How did I change the width?
You just do the deck width on the properties.
I did that here on this point.
Okay.
Do I need to do it on the farther point?
No, should be the previous one. Try to make
Oh, here,
your...
let's do this. Let's do this. That's it.
Oh, weird. But it's still not updating 100% of the time.
Yeah, it's kind of doing it. It got this one wide and then like, oh, it did it for this whole previous section. Okay. So let's back it up.
So what I think is happening there, just because I can kind of see what it is that it right now is kind of trying to guess which points each section is between to kind of determine if it should have a top or if it should be wide or whatever. And it's not exact. So you can see like that point that you're selected right now is kind of like a little inside of that tunnel just because like the section had to finish before the next one could start. So I think that's another thing that I just need to resolve, but
it's all good. I'm going to make this the small section that widens it out. And then I'll give it another point, which will go out to here.
What's up, Brightside?
Yo, what up, Brightside? Yeah, I'm building a snake run. So Tony made me this tool, which we showed a little bit of in previous streams. But I had a whole snake run built over at this reservoir. So like last stream, you know, you hit this jump, you come down here. The snake run was broken. So I'm rebuilding it using Tony's tool. And I just, we were finding some issues with the tool and how it works. So you come in through this gate, you hit this, and you can see all the geo inside is like super funky and weird right now. But Tony's going to fix all that. So we'll be nice and happy. But as you're ripping through here, coming through all these different little areas. So you'll be riding on the walls, which will be very fun. Very tight corners. Gaining some more elevation. Now you're on the opposite wall. And then this is a really long sweeper, which should be pretty fun to go through. You'll come down this long section here. And then you'll pop out and you'll be in a big bowl. So let's see. With this one, yeah, this is the one where I want to take top off. We'll go top left, top right needs to come off. This one will go to 10,000. I gotta do it again. Okay, and then we'll toggle top. Should recalculate. There we go. Okay, well, that's not exactly what I was looking for, Tony.
yeah, so it'll lerp between the two. You don't have those changes yet, or maybe you just need, like, if you move your points around, it might do it. Come on, buddy. Yeah, I will.
Okay, we'll keep it going here. So I did it on this long section previously, and that made the weird triangle shapes, and it was like deforming the wrong way. So this one, there's something weird going on with this Bezier handle, I think. Oh, maybe it's just too long. Yeah, I'm gonna bring it in. Yeah, networking stuff is really hard, Brightside. So I'm glad I have Tony.
Yeah, I've talked about it before, and I feel like, you know, it's not stuff that we ever really talk about now, but just for the first couple years of Unreal, I just built a lot of like multiplayer demos and learned how player controllers work and game modes, and didn't really get into any of the cool flashy stuff that we do these days, but I think it's good that I got a lot of those fundamentals out of the way, because I find a lot of that stuff pretty easy now, which is good.
Yeah, Unreal does make networking stuff pretty fucking simple, which is great. If you're using Unity, you have to like roll your own solution, which is a challenge.
Yeah, and the Unreal systems, they are nice, but it's like, I don't know, it still requires a very specific understanding of how to set things up and how to, you know, keep track of everything and stuff like that. It's probably a lot easier than a lot of other options would be, but it just, a lot of the time when it's just like, I don't, half the time it's like, that doesn't feel like that should be working, and it is, and it almost feels like magic, and then the other half of the time is like, this feels like this should be working, and it's not, and I don't understand why, but... Well, bright side, it's like the way you're doing it, where you're sending a request to the server and then the server sending a multicast out to all the players. Like, from my understanding, that is kind of the main way that you do that, and it's not that straightforward to a lot of people at first. So you definitely have that part figured out, which is good. But I think there's also a lot of situations where it doesn't end up being that straightforward either, which sucks. But you can get pretty far with just that setup. And that, to be fair, like what you showed is pretty much verbatim how almost all of the networking in Hyperskate works right now too. So. Like, I can't imagine what it would take to, you know, make a competitive first-person shooter or something. All of the networking tricks that they have to use to make that, you know, feel fair to everybody and stuff. It's got to be insane.
All right, well, I think we got to, you know, we found the limitation of the tool right here. Is it looks like one side is trying to lerp out and then the other one's lerping in the wrong way. So it's like flaring a little bit.
I'm just going to like copy what you made there and put it into my test level and just like keep working on it until it looks right. So that is a very good, you know, very extreme test case where if I can make everything that you did there work the way it's supposed to, then we're gonna be in great shape.
Yeah, totally. There you go. This one's a little better. I made it a little thinner, so that should be okay. I'm gonna fuck with this point and see if that does anything. Let's bring this in. Let's go back here and toggle top. All right, I don't like it. We're gonna go back here. Pull this out more. There we go. Okay, that's a little better. Sweet. Okay. Yeah, bright side. That's kind of just how you make video games. You're like, you have to find the magic fucking checkbox, and when you hit the right one, all your shit works. And knowing which checkbox does what under the hood can really help you figure that out. But that's like deep Unreal knowledge, and you probably don't need that, especially if you're not like writing code. I assume you're writing a little bit, but mostly working in Blueprint, which is totally valid. I know there are plenty of games that have shipped with only Blueprint and no like code being written. So
tons of games. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Brightside's problem was actually the opposite, where we needed to uncheck something that was checked. Almost never happens.
So okay, so
probably really terrible if I had to be honest with you.
Yeah, I will say this: my understanding of how Destiny works under the hood is it is a custom solution, so it functions in a way that no other FPSs do. And the reason is because it's a hybrid solution for networking. Some parts of the game that happen on tick happen server side, and other parts of the game that happen on tick happen client side. So there's a mix of authoritative states on both.
But there's also no like host player in Destiny. There's a server that is the host that all of the
kind of yes and no. That's what I mean by a hybrid solution. So there is a server, and I mean this could be totally wrong at this point, but my understanding in the past was that the server like ran some physics calculations so that it offloaded it from the player, but player actions happened on the client, and they would have a P2P host. So there would be a shared host for every player in the game, which is very weird.
But does that mean that player host connects to the server, and then the player host is then responsible for orchestrating all of the other connected players, and they're the only one who's actually talking to the server?
I think it's distributed.
Yeah,
I think it's distributed. So say you're playing a raid, and in a raid you have 6 players on your team. There are going to be different clients that are handling some parts of the networking and all talking together. Yeah, it's a very complicated custom solution. And the reason they did that, so this is an important distinction. If you go with dedicated servers, it's very expensive. Very, very expensive because you have to geolocate servers. So if you think about when you play Valorant or like CS, right? You're connecting to a region. When you're connecting to a region, you pick your server, you are connecting to a remote host, and your client is doing almost nothing authoritative.
It's just showing you the visuals.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's what makes it a very fair competitive game. So if you think about that, and the requirements for the business of Destiny are not so that Destiny is a competitive multiplayer game, even though there are PvP, like PvP is an option. That's why you see jank, is because it's not fully dialed in. And depending on who's host at any given moment, you're going to get really fucked up networking stuff that happens. And you're like, how the fuck did that guy kill me? I was behind a wall. And it's like, well,
like
you weren't.
trials, exploits and stuff work, right? You like DDoS to other players so that they disconnect and you win. Yeah.
Yep. So there's all kinds of problems that come with it. But the reason is, if you think about the cost, spinning up geolocated servers, you'd have to have at least 3 in the US, but you'd probably have a lot more. And then you need multiple regions of Europe. Destiny's also popular in South America and Asia. And like to have servers for all of that, you're talking like millions in monthly costs. Whereas if you built a PvP or a P2P solution, which is what Destiny works on, but it's a hybrid one because a lot of the physics stuff needs to happen based on your gear and like what you've equipped. So that database lives in the cloud and the physics happens in the cloud. But what you did as a player happens in a P2P session. It's a very complicated, weird solution. And I don't know if that's actually true or not. I don't know if I can even talk about that. If I'm not supposed to talk about it, let us know and I won't mention it. But I don't think anyone from Bungie's watching us at this point. So.
And like the reason for all of this primarily is cheating. And it's effectively just that if you make a P2P game, which is like if you're talking like your random Unreal multiplayer setup or something that you do with Steam, that's P2P. One of the players is the host, the other players are connecting to them, their computer is running all of the networking and stuff, and so on and so forth. And as I'm sure you can imagine, if you are that person and all of that stuff running on your computer, there's nothing that stops you from altering the traffic that goes in and out or changing, how the game works, injecting code or what have you. So when there's a third-party server that all of the players have to connect to, then no one player has any advantage over the other ones.
Exactly.
That tends to be basically the reason why servers exist.
Yeah, and it's for like fairness in a competitive environment online. So,
yep. Yeah, no, like I'm sure you guys remember in like early Xbox Live days, like everybody would always say host has advantage, and it's probably true to some extent by like even just a few frames or like a little bit of like server lag or something, because the game is running on their machine and being transmitted over the network to all of the other people. So there's a limitation of the speed of light between those people that, the game is delayed by that much. So the host really did have a bit of an advantage. And in a modern system, it still is that way because of what Vince said. Like if somebody lives right next to the data center in US West or whatever, and they're playing against somebody who lives 1,000 miles away, they're connecting to the same server, but one person's connection is going to be much, much faster just because of like the physical limitations of the universe.
One day we'll get there. But for right now, copper and the speed of light. So like how fast and how potent an electrical signal can be sent over copper and how fast light can move through a fiber optic cable are physical limitations. They do exist. We have very fast internet. It's hard for people to understand that, but that shit is real. It actually happens. There's physical limitations. So,
yep, and
that's how it goes.
Yeah, and there's a ton of technology to this point too that goes into multiplayer online stuff that makes it look better than it actually is. Like a lot of the stuff that you're seeing when you're playing an FPS or a fighting game or something is the server is actually trying to predict what you're probably going to do and then merging that in with what you're actually doing like every single frame basically. Because if it accidentally loses your connection or something like that, it will do its best to just kind of keep everything looking right. And you'll hear a lot of talk in fighting games about like rollback netcode and stuff like that. And that's really important in a fighting game. If you don't have that, then your fighting game is going to feel like shit online. And that again is just like a thing that's happening on the server side that is kind of like comparing all of the super fast inputs and shit that's coming in and trying to determine what should have actually happened as opposed to like what each person is seeing on their side. And it doesn't seem like it should work. It doesn't seem like you should be able to like predict these things and like mash all this stuff up when it's like happening in the past and stuff. But it does work and it feels way better than if you don't have it. And it's like this entire discipline of game networking that you can go into. And I remember looking into it early on and just being like, what the fuck? Like, yeah.
In Brightside, you said, I actually didn't think any of those would have been P2P since it's so competitive. Didn't know it was an option besides live servers. So here's the thing you got to also think about is when you have a company as big as Bungie with, 1,000 people working on a thing, there's a team of like 30 engineers dedicated just to, and this is an arbitrary number. I don't know exactly how many people, but there's a team of engineers literally only doing networking code. That's all they do. And so they propose the physical solution. So they need to understand networking, at a fundamental level, just how it works, and then how to write code to make that shit all work within physical limitations. So it's really a problem of like, how many resources can you put towards this before you go live? And what solution do you stick with before you go live? So, because you can't change Destiny to a dedicated server solution now. It would just be, you'd have to rewrite all of the netcode. You would have 100%. To deploy a bunch of different physical stuff, like physical hardware changes.
You just have to rewrite the whole game because, the client side is completely dependent on stuff that's currently happening on the client side and it wouldn't be there anymore. Like it would be such an undertaking. And, if you try to draw a comparison to all this networking stuff to any other industry too, there isn't one because if you think about using a website or something, it's a very like back and forth transaction. You tell the web that you want to load the page. You click on a link. I want to load this other page. You click a button. I want to buy this thing. It's just like a lot of like telling it something and it gives you something back basically. But in a game, it is constant. It's real time. It's happening every single frame and it's happening in different people's computers at the same time, but not literally at the same time in physical space and stuff. So there's just so many problems to solve that have no, replicant in any other industry. It's not the same as streaming a video. That's a very like static thing. You're just kind of feeding a file over the internet, totally different. But
I do have a little bit of an advantage when talking about this over some other game designers because I was a network engineer for a while. I did that for like 7-8 years before I started making video games. I started making video games when I was 30. So, it's a very interesting thing to think about because I know that sometimes when you get into conversations about gameplay experience with other designers and they don't have that knowledge base, they make some really fucking weird assumptions about how shit works and they don't consider physical limitations. Like they don't understand like data can only move so fast because of technology we have. Let's see. Omni says IRC servers had issues like this of desyncing. Server-based games can't trust remote clocks. So how do you actually sequence what really happened against what happens on each client and then having a latency of that connection between the client and the server present, each client's real-time actions out of timeline order? Yes, that's the rollback.
It's like why it's fucking magic that it works as well as it does, basically, because they're like doing time travel to some extent almost.
The trick is that there is latency in the human brain across our nervous system, and we have hardware and software that can recalculate and make new data faster than we can biologically. So we're tricking all the players into making it feel right. That's why game feel is such a this thing that I keep talking about over and over again. It's all smoke and mirrors, and nailing that game feel is, I would say 90% of the time, if not more, if not every time, it's faking reality. You're not trying to be faithful to reality. You're being faithful to how we as humans perceive reality. So when you make a game that is full simulation, it tends to feel bad because we don't fucking experience reality that way. Our brains do a lot of interpolating and changing information and how we receive it so that everyone's perspective is genuinely like their own. So yeah, it's very interesting topic of conversation.
It literally blew my mind when I learned how multiplayer video games actually work when I started learning how to do game dev, because I don't know what you think, but the way that it actually works is like the game as a piece of software is running on each person's computer or console, and when you're in a multiplayer game, there's basically just a server that's saying there should be 2 people in this level, and when the other person moves, they're just telling the server that they moved, and then the server is telling your game that that person who represents your friend in the game moved, and then that person moves on your screen. But it's not like they pushed the button and they moved on your screen. They're not directly controlling that thing on your side. That thing is just this puppet that is being controlled by a third party that is just kind of translating the thing that your friend did on their computer, and you are the same representation on their side. And that like broke my brain at first, because it's like, you're not actually there. It's just an illusion to make it look like you're there, and it's just kind of running in this like standalone client that's talking to the internet. And it's just a very strange, kind of mind-blowing concept to me.
I wanted to address Brightside's question. Are there advantages or disadvantages, or just what the game was built on being the biggest convenience? I always thought live servers were the meta, but maybe it just cuts out the middleman and making sure the clients are reliable. So the biggest considerations for that are cost and fidelity of experience. So if you want the best experience, literally the best way to make that happen is same screen co-op or local area network. That's the fastest, period. All software aside, you're eliminating as much latency as you can between clients and connection and all of that. There's literally latency between when you press a button from the cable that goes into your machine. It's so small we can't see it. Anyone that tells you they can is on some shit. It happens way faster than, your neurons fire. So don't consider that
or something like that. Yeah. But
yeah. So it really comes down to that. It's how much money can you spend to stand up dedicated servers? Is that cost worth it based on how much revenue you think your product is going to bring in, especially when you're talking about video games? That's where it comes down to. So if you're playing a game like Valorant, which is meant to be competitive with a professional esports scene, it must be perfect. So when they play tournaments and at the pro level, they have a local server. They're not playing them online. So everyone is connecting to a local instance of the game that is a backup of, whatever cloud server they're using.
But it's like local, and they probably, I would imagine, go as far as to say like every single computer connects to the switch with a 25-foot Ethernet cable. Even if it's 6 inches from the switch, you get a 25-foot Ethernet cable. That guy gets a 25-foot Ethernet cable. They're the same cable, the same spec. Everybody is on an even playing field. This is actually how the stock exchange works too. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this story.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Companies used to buy the properties closer to the stock exchange so that their computers would have a closer run to the thing. And eventually it got so unfair that the stock exchange did this thing where they created a space where all the companies could put their servers, and it did what I just said. All of the cables running to all of those machines, regardless of how physically close they are to the thing, have exactly the same length to make it fair, so that everybody's transaction speed is the same. And yeah.
Okay, so Brightside said it must be crazy to authenticate people's MTX and cosmetic skins. So this is where the server has that information. So that's why if you think about in Destiny with a P2P solution, there is a server. So imagine it's somewhere central to the United States. Let's say, since I'm in Colorado, we'll say it's Denver, right? Because it's pretty central to the United States. Anyone in the US connecting to it is going to get their player data off of that, and that will push out to each of the clients to let each of the clients know who has what and how that appears. So that's why if you're ever playing Destiny and you saw a player with that like shimmery ghost texture over their gun or like their helmet or their player model or something like that, that is the default. We don't know what this person has, and there's an issue with the database, so we're going to make it appear as something.
Yep.
So when you see that, it's just the placeholder graphics for, we don't know exactly what to display here, but we must show something.
Because software really, really doesn't like when you tell it to do something and the thing isn't there. So it'll crash, straight up crash. So you have to put stuff in place in almost every circumstance, especially in stuff like games, where you just kind of say like, if you can't find what goes here, don't crash, just show this generic thing instead, because it would crash otherwise, no question, because it's called like a null pointer reference, and it makes software very unhappy.
It's crazy how quickly it can project all these moving parts in real time. Yes, totally. Pizza making sim, yeah. Yeah, exactly. You have to think about like, there's just so much cost that goes into making an esport. Omni,
we didn't even talk about like handshaking or anything. That's another
Yeah.
thing that just kind of gets done for you with like Steam and Unreal these days. But if you guys ever did like a Hamachi setup to play video games with your friend over the internet in the 2000s, because the game didn't have like multiplayer servers, that's called handshaking. And that's basically like this service that allows, if me and Vince want to play a game together, it can connect his computer to my computer over the internet without us having to like effectively put a VPN in place to just play Terraria or something like that. And Steam does that for you on the back end now. But if you're not using Steam or you're using your own thing, that's just another layer of shit that you have to deal with, is like, take players who say, I want to play multiplayer, find them and put them together, doing this like networking magic behind the scenes, because it doesn't just work magically automatically like that.
Yeah, bright side or on McDonald's Wi-Fi, 100%. Omni says it's all fun and games until you watch the replay and realize your opponent was 90-degree angles facing away from you and they somehow got you. So that is a really interesting consideration as well. And that's why a lot of games don't use the death cam or the kill cam, is because it shows how bad the latency is, or the difference between the clients is, and it shows it to the player. And they're like, this is bullshit. He wasn't even facing me. It's like, well, he was.
Yeah. Or
But
it might
he
be
wasn't
playing a
like-
game too, where like on that person's computer, they shot and killed you, and the server maybe wasn't sure. And
Exactly.
it's constantly making decisions about like how to make it feel good to everybody. And so if it's not sure if he killed you, but on the client, they're like, we killed him, you should kill him. Then the server might just go, okay, sounds good. But the server's like, he was facing 90 degrees away. I don't know, but we're just going to go for it. And yeah.
So the likelihood is that you actually did get killed, but the visuals don't match because of that latency. So the likelihood is generally, and I'm saying this because I know people who write this shit care about that player experience. So they care about whether or not you really did lose. It's harder to show you that you really did lose in a kill cam, because you can't see all the things that we're talking about. So that's why you get that, like, what the fuck, he wasn't even facing me, or I was behind a wall. It's like, well, but you also weren't. And the server has to make a determination about who is correct. You know, so that's why when you play at a competitive level, they do the thing, like even League of Legends does it. They have local server instances to the venue. So they spin up a whole server cluster inside the venue where they're holding a pro event, or even like the international for Dota. That's all running on a local thing. You can tell that it's not when you watch a pro event and some weird shit is happening, because it's actually running over the internet. And higher production games and higher production IPs never do that, because they can't make the game look bad or inconsistent. So they really invest fully in making sure this experience is faithful to what all the players are experiencing, and everyone can agree this is what happened. What's really nuts about the big competitive games, there's literally 2 or 3 different types of servers involved: lobby, server, matchmaking, and the actual game stream. Yes, all of that is very
100%. Yep. And there might even just be like an auth server that's doing the like P2P or the microtransaction validation, and you know, ensuring your cosmetics and your user account is all valid and stuff. It's going to be like a full operation behind the scenes, probably more so than like a lot of like internet companies that do something slightly more straightforward even.
Oh, Brightside, for what it's worth, Brightside says that doesn't mean everything is being recorded. Like a dash cam, it'll only get the last 30 seconds. That's not true. For much more expensive, big AAA competitive games, they're making sure that that tick rate is fucking accurate. So they're recording everything all the time, And then
but it's not video, it's just data points.
yeah,
It's,
exactly.
the vertex locations of the player character and, you know, the state of each player and stuff like that. And they can just kind of like, if you have all of that too, the really cool thing is you can kind of just feed it back into the system and just hit replay, and it'll just like do everything that happened again. You can kind of fly around and look at it and stuff. And that's something that we're working on putting into Hyperscape.
Yeah, I think that was the coolest thing about Halo when Bungie made it for Halo 3, and you could like look at your replays in like, you know, matrix camera and pause it frame by frame. All they did was take that data and visualize it through the engine. Yep. So when you're saying, you know, like that last 30 seconds or whatever, it's not a video that you're seeing. So it's not captured video. It's data points in the raw game data. So what actually occurred in the match. So that's where Adder says, even if you feel like they got, you know, like you got cheated or whatever, you mathematically didn't. Yes, that's correct. Like in the code, you did not get cheated. It just doesn't look the same to you as a player when you're watching the kill cam. And it's because the kill cam isn't real. It's fake. It's like, it's running all that data back through the engine. Build up is pretty simple behind the scene. Yeah. Keyframes on a timeline. Yeah, exactly. That's totally the right way to think about it. I think that's what made the Halo thing just so cool about the Halo replays back in the day was, you know, Bungie was the first studio to even say, you know what, we have all this data. Let's just give it to the player and then visualize it through the engine. Very cool shit happens when you can do that. And it also, so the other risk is that Bungie was confident enough in the code that they wrote for that game that it was going to look good every time, and it did. And they did such a fucking good job of it that it was great. So, and I do know that some of it was faked so that it looked like what actually happened in the match. Yeah, and the sequencer makes it extra solid.
It's very like relevant to what we did for Hyperscape for the trailer. Is Vince recorded the runs that we put the characters through, and then I was able to kind of just take that data and I built the animation BP from that data to then say, like, when you ride down this line that is a real line that Vince rode, I want you to look like you're actually doing it. And I was able to kind of put it together that way. But then I was able to also then take it back and say, okay, if I just put this on a player while they're doing this, it should also look right. And that was the case. So definitely a good way to approach it.
Yeah, and Adder brings up, you know, Bungie did that too for a very long time. Every match could be recreated down to every millisecond. All the data was truncated in the form of heat maps and other visualizers so that design could make better choices about where players were doing things. So I'll say this. I'm conflicted about using big data to make design decisions. I think big data should help inform a design decision, but it should never be the driving thing. So if you're like, I want to understand how players are playing on this map, you can look at the heat map and you go, oh, players are dying at this corner every time.
Everybody goes to this one spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And you have to think about why. You can't use the data to justify a change. And that is another problem. I see, you know, a lot of AAA designers using the data to justify changes, but you need to say there could be 15 different reasons, some that I haven't even considered about why players are going over here. So then playing the game is important and understanding why you as a player want to take that same course of action, knowing everyone dies in this corner. Why would you go there? Right? Like that, you need both things. If you just operate off of one, you're going to make a mistake. Player feel was always priority of the frequently conflicting raw data. Exactly, Adder. That was the thing I was talking about where you were gone, was the player feel being one of the most important things. That's kind of been a theme of this stream, actually. And like, what is player feel? Well, it's not real. It's just how we as humans interpret what we're experiencing and making sure that's as faithful to something that we would believe in our brains. And oftentimes, if not every time, when you directly simulate reality, it doesn't fucking work for our brains because our brains do not perceive reality in the actual way reality functions. So that's a really fucking weird thing to think about, but it's true. Our brains cheat a lot of stuff and tell us what is happening. So our memories are fallible. You know, every person's experience of an event is not necessarily accurate because everyone's brain is suggesting things to them and filling in gaps and making things up. So it's very hard to understand if you're actually right or if, you know, what is objective reality. Like that's a very difficult concept, I think. And I think that's why I, you know, complain a little bit. I don't know if I ever have on stream, but I complain a little bit about psychology as something we just don't understand. We don't understand the physics of how our brains work deeply enough to make assertions about how every person is going to act given a set of circumstances. So that's why I say, like, if you're studying psychology to be a game designer, it's helpful. But we were talking about what was that console called, Tony? There was a console I was looking at. It's the N64 like retro console that's made for HD and you can plug your carts in and shit like that. Fuck, I lost my point. What was I talking about? I was saying that your brain perceives it in a different way from reality. God damn it. Well, it's completely gone. Yeah, we're all living in a simulation nowadays anyway. Skeleton meat robots powered by chemicals, lightning, and hallucinations. Yeah, exactly. Artificial sky. So I was talking about the emulator thing. Yeah, the analog. Yeah, I was talking about that and how. Oh, that was it. Okay, I got it. So we were talking about why older games are being remade, and I was looking for like a justification about why you would want to do it and how it's valuable to people other than just a nostalgia cash grab, right? And we kind of like settled on the point that preserving old games is somewhat valuable in an academic setting. So for instance, if you're teaching you know, a person straight out of high school, an 18-year-old, how to make video games and be a good designer, we were using FPS as an example. So thinking about how you would say this was the first analog control stick shooter, and you're talking about GoldenEye, how do you get an 18-year-old today in a classroom setting to play that, to understand that game feel, so that they can connect the dot between, you know, the N64 controller with the single stick control and the C buttons to the twin stick shooter of Halo CE? Like, that's a good lesson to understand. You know, you need a second stick now. You can't just do it with the buttons. It's a poor user experience. Well, how did they do it with the buttons? And, you know, what were the different things they used to work around to try to make this thing work so that you could control it this way? Because previously it was all mouse and keyboard. So anyway, that was...
Vince, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
We are actually supposed to be in a meeting right now.
Oh, shit. You are right. Oh my God! Yeah, we need to go to a meeting.
But so we are gonna have to abruptly end stream here.
Yeah, we love you guys. Thank you so much for everything.
We'll be back tomorrow with Half-Life. We'll probably be hanging on like Discord or something later today. So hit us up. Appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for the great discussion. It was so good that we got completely distracted about what we're supposed to be doing. So have a good one, everybody.